Housekeepers confess. The most bizarre hotel and casino encounters ever. Oh, I've got one. I should specify that I was a night auditor, though. This one starts out benign enough. My shift started and I had a small line. It's Saturday and we're near a couple of casinos, so it's not unusual. A very polite man checks in and rents a top-level suite for him and his wife. I get him in and start checking in the next couple. Being distracted, I barely noticed the previous couple come back in, only that the wife was partially obscured by the luggage cart, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's an ugly woman. The night after that is quiet and I leave. I come in the next night to hear what's unfolded after I left. The couple never came back down to check out, and haven't been seen since. When housekeeping entered the room, they immediately alerted the front desk management. Every surface of the room is covered in lubricant. The bed, the couch, the jacuzzi, and even the mini-fridge is covered in bottles and bottles of stuff, and baby oil. We know for sure that it's lubricant because a dozen bottles are left in the tub. But wait, there's more. In addition to the slippery stuff, there's a rather large horse-proportioned adult toy left behind with thick black scuff marks and cracked down the center. My front desk manager, in her infinite wisdom, decides they must have been junkies, and this toy is where they're hiding their needles. She decides to pick it up to open it for safety reasons, but when she does, all that falls out is a rather impressive motor that's been burned out. The icing on this cake comes when they review the security tape. The wife is clearly a man in a wig. It's a big, burly dude wearing the cheapest wig you've ever seen. I worked for a hotel chain in Colorado, and one day my coworker and I went to strip a bed, and the bed was just full of oranges. The dresser, oranges. Side table, cans of mandarin oranges? Not exactly shocking or disgusting, but it was weird. Maybe they were doing a self-cleanse? Vitamin C in excess does give you diarrhea. Alternatively, they could have been from an Asian country where mandarins specifically mean good luck or long life. I worked as a concierge for an upscale hotel, so naturally there wasn't a line for my desk. I fielded complaints regularly, though. One day, a woman, very nice and patient, which is rare, calmly explained to me that her 5-year-old opened the door to their bathroom and there was a housekeeper pooping in there. The housekeeper and the boy screamed so loudly that I'd already gotten noise complaints from the adjacent rooms. Needless to say, that family got a free night and an upgrade. Should have locked the door, though. You know what? Given how much crazy stuff that housekeeping seems to have to see on a daily basis, on this and other videos, I'm not going to begrudge them using the loo that they shouldn't have been using. Better that than going postal because of everything they've had to witness. Not a housekeeper, but I was a bartender at a Marriott hotel years ago. Along with regular bartending duties, I also delivered bar orders as part of room service. One night, I received a typical order, wine and beer, from a room that called down to the bar. I brought the drinks to the room and was greeted by an early 50s man wearing a white robe. He greeted me and asked me to place the drinks on a dresser fairly close to the door. As I went to place the drinks down, I noticed the bed had between 10 to 13 adult toys laid out neatly along the foot of the bed. The sizes ranged from normal to horse. They were evenly spaced and all facing towards the headboard. While he was signing, I made my way to the door, and as soon as he handed me the book, I smiled and said, "Thank you, have a great night." He just smiled and that was it. 0% acknowledgement on his end. Had an American guy come into our hotel, meant to be staying for 3 days. Went into his room and never left the room in over 2 weeks. He kept phoning down to the desk to extend his stay. The strange thing was, he had the same routine every day. Around 8 a.m., he'd order 8 bottles of beer and 20 cigarettes to be sent up to his room. He'd sign the check off to his room for the beers, but he had to pay cash for the cigarettes as they came from the hotel shop, which wasn't owned by the hotel and therefore wasn't able to charge to the room. The cigarettes came to around £11, and he'd always give us a £20 note and told us to keep the change. Lunchtime rolls around and again, 8 bottles of beer and 20 cigarettes. Come dinner time, again, another 8 beers but 40 cigarettes this time. I guess he had to keep a stock for when the shop closed at night time. This happened every day he was staying with us. No one ever saw him leave the hotel, so assumed he had a stack of £20 notes to pay for these cigarettes. He also instructed housekeeping to not clean his room. When he eventually left, the maid was greeted with hundreds of empty beer bottles, the bin was half full with cigarette ends and ash, and the room was left remarkably clean, albeit smelling awful. We tried to research the guy, but could only find he was part of an American broadcasting company. This was a long time ago, I can't remember which one, so we assumed he was over here to lie low. He checked out, paid off his bill, didn't bother to check the bill, got into a taxi and was never seen again. I walked in on a couple sleeping on the bathroom floor of a hotel room in the hotel I work for. The bed was untouched and everything was normal with that one exception. Yep, cold tile floors are great when you're hammered out of your mind. I stayed at a hotel that hosted a Magic the Gathering tournament. I was visiting Atlantic City, only realized what it was as I played Magic a decade ago. In the morning as I was leaving, a housekeeper had a room open and cleaning. He stops me and says, "What the frick is this? Is this worth money?" I look in and somebody has filled the bathtub nearly to the brim with lands and commons cards. I worked housekeeping for a few weeks. I guess the weirdest thing was a 70-ish-year-old couple leaving their room and me going to clean it, and finding a big bottle of KY and an adult toy so big that even Ron Jeremy would have been jealous left out on the bed. I think about this question every time I go to Vegas. Vegas housekeeping would be the biggest rated reality show ever. American Horror Story, Vegas housekeeping. Last time I went to a Vegas casino for a conference, they said my room wasn't ready yet, but they'd text me when it was. A few hours later, I got the text and went to said room. Upon entering, I could hear a loud vacuum cleaner running, and saw a man on his hands and knees working on the floor behind the bed with a wet vac. I cautiously approached because I knew he didn't hear me enter. I inevitably startled him and he stood up and shouted, "You're not supposed to be here yet!" I said, "Hey, I got a text that the room was ready and an electronic key sent to my phone." He glanced down at the floor behind the bed and back at me and calmly said, "This is really bad. It's gonna take a while. This is really bad." I asked, "What is it?" And he said, "Not sure, but it's bad." I shrugged and set my bags down on the clean side of the room. I figured 2 really bad ratings from the man whose job is to clean Vegas hotel rooms is probably advice I should heed. But it also made me realize I've stayed in rooms like that without knowing what kind of damage had been previously done. At least I knew not to walk on that side of the bed. We had a hotel room one time and checked in around 3 or 4ish. I can't remember what hotel it was. When we walked in, one of the housekeepers was asleep in the chair. Apparently they'd taken a rest and checked out for who knows how long. We woke her up when we came in the room. She was very apologetic, took her cart and stuff with her right away. We never said anything to the staff or saw her again. The room was all clean and set up, so nothing to complain about. If she's anything like the housekeepers I know, that was one of many jobs. Working double shifts isn't uncommon, and many of those ladies work extra when offered. You're good people for not saying anything. Agreed, that lady needed that sleep. Nobody willingly breaks rules and jeopardizes their job unless they're desperate for some sleep. I worked in a casino where I watched a middle-aged man literally shake a solid turd down his pant leg, sit back down and continue on his machine. I turned around with backpack vacuum on and went to my lunch break. I didn't get paid enough to pick up a stranger's duty. I don't know how true this is, but someone once told me that there are people who wear adult diapers when they go to gamble so that they don't have to leave the machine. And that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. How does one get in that deep? Someone I know worked housekeeping at a casino. He walked in on a guy smearing doodie all over the walls with his bare hands. He was angry that he lost his money and thought he was justified in doing so. Housekeeping called security. He was charged and banned. Ah yes, the Eric Cartman method. This couple made a hasty retreat from a 5-star hotel I was working for. They left an entire brick of white snow on the bathroom counter. Kinda seems like they forgot the one thing that someone with a brick of nose dust would want to remember. I don't know, if I were younger and poorer, would I have taken that brick? How does one sell that sort of thing? I'd probably either end up dead or in prison. Cleaned a room that contained both a deck of Uno cards and a knockoff deck of Ono cards. In the late 90s, I had a roommate who managed a hotel in Manhattan. He came home one night and told me they found a 3-foot nitrous tank in one of the rooms. They disposed of it personally. These days, they'd probably call the bomb squad. This is related, but not exactly the question. When my wife and I were looking at wedding venues, one we went to was a hotel. The event manager wanted to take us up and show us the honeymoon suite. She opened the door, and there were 2 old men, like in their 60s or 70s, shirtless, drinking vodka in the room. She was so extremely embarrassed and apologetic. She was very sweet too, but you could tell she was so angry at whoever had screwed that up for her. We didn't choose that place, that wasn't the reason why, but I hadn't thought about that in a while and figured someone else might get a kick out of it. I was a housekeeper at a dive of a hotel in Chico, California in the late 90s. A week or so before, a local homeless woman had stuck her arm in a tiger's cage because a circus was traveling through town and had gotten mauled. That weekend, I was cleaning rooms and knocked on the door of a room paid for by a local charity organization. Turned out the guest was in the middle of bedroom fun times. Quickly realizing it wasn't a good time to clean the room, I said I'd come back later. To my dismay, the woman opened the door and asked me to join her and her friend. I declined. She then reached out and grabbed me by the arm and tried to drag me in. Her arm was covered in bandages and lacerations. It was the woman who had been tiger mauled. I yanked my arm free and ran away. I'll never forget what her shredded, bandaged hand looked like. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? It's not my story, but a friend was a maid at a cheap hotel in our university town. She has a bunch of gross and weird stories, but the most insane is when she came into work and found a full abandoned crystal lab in the bathroom of one of the rooms. Her manager made her clean up a bunch of trash from the different ingredients and scrub chemical stains that must have been left by spills. Apparently the room smelled like a bad science experiment, or just normal crystal, and the management refused to get any police involved. I imagine they believed it would discourage their regular clientele. I think she quit very soon after. Found a dead body under a bed. Manhattan. Scary stuff. I was a supervisor at a hotel in Canada about 6 years ago. A man's 80-year-old father called me one Sunday morning very worried about his son. He was supposed to meet him at 9 for breakfast, but the guy hadn't shown up. The father asked me if he was up in his room. I went up and knocked, but no answer. I could hear the shower running, so I assumed he was in there. I slid a note under the door to call his father ASAP and went back to work. 40 minutes later, the father called back asking if I'd found him. I went back up and was about to knock when I heard the shower still running, so I went into a full-blown panic mode and entered the room. He was on the floor between the two beds, actively over-medicating. Called 911 and hopefully saved his life. I've never heard anything more from them. Cleaning the room afterwards was super sketchy because there were needles everywhere. I was an IT guy for a casino. Got a call that a guest couldn't get his device connected to the Wi-Fi, so I had to go up and give him a hand. Come to get his tablet connected, he's in the room, an older guy, 60 or older, wearing a pair of gold booty shorts. He's got 3 girls in there with him. Their IDs meant they had to be 21, but they weren't much more than that. Thongs and fuzzy-heeled slippers. No tops on, shameless. They wanted to connect the iPad so he can play some video to go along with the game they're playing. Couple of bags of toys and tubes of stuff scattered around the room. 2 of the girls were getting impatient and already playing with each other by the time I got there. Look, I'm into my own stuff, so who am I to judge? Got all of his devices connected. They were able to get his movie and got it playing on the TV in the room. He tipped me a small baggie of Molly and a couple of $100, all in 50s. I took the money and I let him keep the Molly. Found out later he was a VIP card member and typically dropped 20 grand or so on the tables. Had a teacher who was the manager of a Marriott in Germany for a while. She has wild stories. Once found an anaconda in the bathroom, wrapped around the shower curtain pole. Pulled undressed devil worshippers out of the pool at 3 a.m. when the pool closed and they refused to get out. Those people weren't even guests. And saw the manager with a wheelbarrow, a hose, and a shovel. He went somewhere, went to lunch, and came back. After his lunch, she followed him and asked what was up. He didn't speak good German and just said, "Cleaning up African lady leg." Turned out some lady had jumped from the top floor of one side of the building. The hotel was kind of an L shape, one side higher than the other, and she had hit the emergency ladder on the way down and had her leg torn off before becoming mush on the roof of the other side of the building. He had shoveled most of her into the wheelbarrow at this point and was just working on getting her leg unstuck from the ladder. A couple came to this luxury dude ranch I worked at and spent over $5 grand to stay there, only to not come out of their room the entire time. Went in to clean the room when they left and saw incredibly expensive, unopened alcohol and boxes of bedroom toys scattered around the room. On the bed, they left a note that said, "Enjoy." What? We threw out the toys. Who the frick would use toys left by an unknown person? But we got pretty hammered that night. Was on a youth trip with my church. Guys stayed in one room, girls in the other. All of us bored kids started looking around the room, because kids. and we found a nug of green herb under the bed. Super big find for a couple of church kids. We go to tell the girls what we found, and they go on to tell us they did the same thing and found blood all over the wall. Well, that took a frickin' wild right turn. Like, the majority of the answers we're getting are not from housekeepers themselves, but honestly, the results of housekeepers failing to do their jobs are just as entertaining in some cases, and contain more or less the same content. Oh, I can answer this one. I worked at a huge water park resort. I was doing a late shift at a time of year when the resort was almost empty. So, tired of knocking on all the doors, I just barged into the rooms to clean them. To clarify, I normally always knock, but I just had 20 or so rooms without a guest. Come to this room on the 4th floor, I walk in, and there's an old heavy guy feasting on a bucket of fried chicken. Lights off in front of the TV. He stared at me for a couple of seconds, and I apologized before he could say anything. Left the room immediately. I later found out that the room was supposed to be vacant. I have no idea where that guy came from, why he was there, or how he got there. I used to work on a military base as a housekeeper. I was there for about a month and a half. One time, someone checked out early, so I had a room added to my list. Knocked, went in, and there was blood everywhere. I immediately called down to the front. I said, I need help now. I was new, I was not prepared for this. Blood everywhere. It had soaked down through the duvet, layers of sheets, to the mattress. There were bloody handprints everywhere. On the mirrors, on the headboards, on the back of doors, showers, carpet, the kitchenette, in every crack and crevice of the bathroom, on the shower head, just everywhere. Someone had decided to have a finger painting session during that time of the month with their boyfriend. Turns out some brass's daughter had got a room while visiting her dear old dad and had her Tinder date over. Daughter had enough foresight to tell her parents that she was on her period and might have bled through the bedding, but she was scared and didn't know what to do. When we said her date was accountable too, she claimed that she 100% didn't have someone else in the room with her. It was $1,800 to clean up that mess and replace everything, and Dad was losing his mind over it, yelling and screaming the whole time. They kept saying there was no way it should cost so much, calling us liars. After sitting in and listening, calmly, after being screamed at, my boss slid over the pictures to him. From that point, you could hear a pin drop. He got out his checkbook, wrote the check, and quietly left. My mother was once a housekeeper at a Harrah's casino hotel. She opened up a room and a terrible smell hit her. Apparently, a handicapped man staying at the hotel was waiting for his help to show up, but they never did, and his bowel movements had overflowed its container, and his phone was dead and he couldn't move. She went to go find help and left that day, and never came back. Poor guy. I'll never forget this one room I had to clean as a housekeeper. It was one of my first jobs. I was 16, we were given 30 minutes max per room, and I walked in and immediately radioed my manager, letting her know that I would need longer. The stench smacked me in the face immediately. BO and meat. The tan carpet and all of the sheets were stained with deep red barbecue sauce, and there were over 40 rib bones everywhere. There was a tripod left on its side in the corner of the room, and handcuffs on the floor lamp, which they obviously lost the key to because they tried to break the base of the lamp to get them off. I almost cried trying to get the damn barbecue sauce out of the carpet. The manager sent 2 women up to help me when she saw what I was dealing with. I only assume a cheaply made food smut was filmed the night before that event. Worked a summer job at a hotel near Cedar Point back in the early 90s. Went to a room to see if the guest had left without checking out. She checked out all right. Bullet in the dome on the patio. Room was on the 3rd floor. Her red and grey matter had dripped down 3 floors between the deck slats. Had to keep 3 rooms closed for days afterwards. Lots of power washing and bleach. Almost as bad as the fellow who slipped running on the treadmill and caught his twig and berries between the roller and belt. 911 was summoned for that one. I used to work in reservations in a big chain hotel in London. Housekeeping used to tell us there was one regular guest who used to always leave a single, whole, intact raw egg in the bed when they checked out. Nobody ever figured out why or where on earth they got that single raw egg in the middle of central London. Grocery stores aren't frequent in the area, and they certainly don't sell eggs one by one. One time I walked into a room and it was completely covered in red stains. Absolutely everywhere you could see. On the beds, the carpets, the floors, the walls, all over the bathroom, and even a bit on the ceiling. No idea how they managed to do that. At first I thought it might be blood, but then I noticed it reeked of alcohol. They spilled red wine absolutely everywhere. The room had to be shut down, and they had to bring up the shampoo machines. I think they might have had to repaint too. Bonus story, that very same day I walked into a room that was very heavily smoked in. The smell was so extremely bad that I couldn't breathe at all. My manager said that it takes at least 5 people chain smoking for at least 12 hours straight to make a room smell as bad as that one did. That also required a machine, and they had to replace the mattresses and curtains. Smoking wasn't allowed anywhere in that hotel. What absolute horror stories do you have from working at Hot Topic? I worked at a Hot Topic in 1999 to 2000. We used to get a fair amount of exotic dancers that came in because we were the only place that sold see-through vinyl tops and 6-inch stack boots and stuff like that. Anyway, our fitting room was basically a hole cut into a wall with a mirror and thick curtain that had to be pulled closed just right. This one day, one of these ladies who takes her clothes off for money came in to try on a bunch of stuff and really didn't even bother with the curtain. Apparently, she was just so used to people seeing her natural form that it wasn't a big deal for her. Granted, this was a weekday morning and she and her manager or boyfriend or whatever he was were the only people in the store besides my manager and me. At one point, she just stopped using the fitting room altogether and was just using the full-length mirror on the door to the stockroom. My manager and I really had no idea what to do because at this point she's got about $1,500 to $2,000 worth of merchandise that she's probably buying, and this lady is good for both business and morale. She didn't really seem to be worried at the prospect of anyone seeing her, and the way our store was set up was really narrow and long, and the display fixtures were tall and bulky. It was very difficult to see into and out of the store unless you were standing in the center aisle. It made loss prevention a nightmare, but really allowed this lady to let her freak flag fly. She finally puts her clothes on the cash wrap as she's checking out. My manager gave me so much crap after that because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't even make eye contact with the customer while I rang her up. That was the largest transaction I've ever rung up in my time there, and paid for it with the largest wad of cash I'd seen in my life up until that point. In short, a woman who takes her clothes off for money came in on a slow day and treated the store like her own private dressing room. My high school girlfriend worked there back in the day. She said the worst part of the day was having to collect merchandise from the fitting rooms and cleaning the fitting rooms. Apparently, all sorts of nasty women would go in there and try on the panties, not use a liner, and just generally leave them all crusty and bad smelling. They'd also leave pads and tampons all over the place. She said they had to throw away so much merchandise that was left in that condition. I feel like this may be a problem anywhere they sell clothes, but then again, Hot Topic may attract a different type of customer, so it might have happened to us more often. I worked in the soft lines section of Target for a couple of years. My manager found a swimsuit with a used tampon in it in the fitting room. I remember people getting very angry when we told them they couldn't try on the underwear. I always wondered why they'd want to try on underwear that someone else had potentially already tried on. Okay, this reads like an R-rated version of one of the short little bits from the show Superstore, and that show did not shy away from gross-out humor, although it might be up for debate on whether this is gross-out or simply whether we're too sensitive about everything regarding women's downstairs areas. I mean, this is pretty ick, right? Liner seems like a good idea if you're planning on trying on undies. I worked at Hot Topic about 8 years ago. For the most part, the gig was one of the best part-time jobs I ever had. Great managers, great co-workers, and great customers. Only 2 instances stand out in my mind. This was around when Twilight was big, you see. Middle-aged women would come in and ask where the Edward or Jacob merch was and then just start fawning over them in the most uncomfortable way. Then there was my actual interview. It was a group interview. One of the questions was something about either a difficult customer service moment or something else. This one guy, obvious Hot Topic scene type, proudly talks about the time he worked at a bookstore and sucker-punched a female customer in the face for calling his style weird or freaky or something. I never saw that guy again, so I don't think he got the job. I worked for 2 years at my local Hot Topic, and the worst stories both involved the fitting room. Our fitting room used to be a self-service room in the back of the store with a red curtain in front of it. An employee noticed 2 feet in the room and opened it to find 2 people just doing the deed and had to clean up the remains. A second incident came when a smell wafted from the same room. It was later discovered that someone had actually taken a dump in the room when they went to, quote, try on clothes. We ended up fitting the room with galvanized pieces of chain and a master lock to keep the curtain open. Luckily, shortly after, we got a full store overhaul that put in actual fitting rooms. God, we had to guard the dressing room like a fortress. I had to prevent a teenage girl and who I thought was her boyfriend from going in there. I also told her she couldn't take the armful of thongs they'd picked out into the dressing room, and she goes, "Daddy, will you hold my panties?" and hands them over, and then tells me, "He's my stepdad, but I call him Daddy." So then her 40-something crystal addict mum wanders over to confirm that yes, this teenage juggalo is her husband, and that he's a few years older than her daughter, and that they go to the same high school, and that she finds their whole dynamic adorable. Every time the girl called him Daddy, her mum would cackle and tell me she just loves her daddy. They have classes together at school, and she loves telling everyone that she goes to school with her daddy. They do everything together. She loves doing stuff with her daddy. That crap almost made me go back to church. Also, no, I don't live in Alabama. A petite friend is currently a manager at one, and her issue is always a customer that became a too often repeat customer, obsessed with her or another female employee. Currently, it's a guy that swears they'd have everything in common because he likes all the things at the store too, as if she curated it. And now he has to stay 500 feet away from the store. I heard stories like this from my local store several times. They ended up promoting this giant butt-kicker goth chick with purple hair to manager, and she'd straight up threaten these creepy guys. She had zero problem calling security or police if someone was making life difficult for an employee. I went to community college with a girl who worked there, and she said about 2 weeks after that manager got hired, nobody had been mistreated since. How to find the perfect Hot Topic manager? Pick the scariest, most intimidating person you can find. Thursday is actually my last day with Hot Topic after 4 years. In general, the company's amazing to its employees, and I've met some incredible people, but boy do I have stories. Once I found a male contraceptive in our anime section. It was open and filled with, well, something. Then we had the girl who I'm positive had some mental issue because she'd get into the fitting room and try to lure anyone in there to help her and then try to seduce them. She was actually pretty, but young and filled to the brim with crazy. Alice Cooper came into the store once, totally unannounced, and brought a teacup pig. Absolutely wonderful person. Gave our metalhead associate tickets to his show, and that guy just about lost it. Also met Machine Gun Kelly, Mayday Parade, We the Kings, and Max Green of Escape the Fate. Machine Gun Kelly and We the Kings were total buttholes. We had a guy get thrown against the front gate on the morning of a Funko Pop release. In general, the job has taught me some pop collectors are grade A buttholes. I had a woman ask me if she should go back to taking her clothes off for money after her C-section. She then lifted her shirt to show me the scar and the rest of her chest. And finally, we found out there was a group of mole rats who wrote fanfiction about the staff at our store. I never got to see any, and I'm kinda glad for that. I had a woman come in with her sleeping infant and scream at me to turn off the music while she strolled around the store. I mean, if your baby's sleeping and you want them to continue doing so, maybe don't come to browse the store that you can hear music blasting from the other side of the mall. I don't know what to tell you. I was working on the sales floor, and this guy, at least in his 30s and pretty high, starts making really creepy comments to me about this 15-ish girl that was checking out. I asked him to leave, and nothing more came of it, but it was chilling. Also had a coworker get fired because they were selling green herb out of the back room. She'd sneak it into their bag while they were checking out. Also had a different off-duty coworker come in hammered late one night to tell everyone working how great we were. That was actually kinda nice. Besides that, it was a lot of kicking out vaping teens and letting the quiet girls from my school try on skimpy Harley Quinn bikinis in the dressing room. Former employee. I worked a whole 3 months in summer, so all the kids were out and about. I was stocking Disney merchandise, and I couldn't help but notice a kid underneath one of our clearance racks. I heard some strange noise coming from there too, so I crouched under and looked at the kid. He had a brooch, with the needle and everything in his mouth. I asked him where his parents were, and before I knew it, he'd swallowed the pin and ran out of the store. I couldn't leave and go to search for the kid, so I let security know about the brooch child. Never knew what happened after that. I can't seem to forget that kid though. My current boss was a former store manager at Hot Topic, and he told me that he caught one of his employees stealing a shirt that he'd stuffed into a Sonic cup. From then on out, everyone had to check bags and beverages for merchandise. I worked at a UPS warehouse, and there's a story that goes around about a guy who smuggled diamonds out by putting it in his water and saying it was crushed ice. So now they make us dump out our drinks before we leave. And this is why we can't have nice things, people. People like this are the reason we implement stupid rules to catch them or stop them before they injure other people. Thanks a lot, jerkwads. I worked there for 13 years. There was so much weird, but that's just retail in general, I guess. Once caught a guy tickling his pickle into women's shoes in the dressing room. Also, people doing the deed in there more often than you'd be comfortable with. I worked for them when the great school weapon tragedy of '99 happened. We carried a brand of clothing back then called Serial Killer, which featured pop culture pics and references and some edgy saying, like a picture of Bruce Lee that said "revenge" or something like that. The morning after that tragic event, we got an email to pull all Serial Killer clothing off the sales floor, as well as every trench coat in the store. By the end of the day, I'd already had to call security twice due to people showing up at the store and shouting at me for supporting those psychos and training the next ones. Then the TV networks showed up and pretty much camped the front of our store, mobbing every customer as they walked out and asking them why this dark lifestyle attracted them. The mall ended up having security just hang out in front of our store and walking our employees to their cars for a week afterwards. Honestly, it was the best job I ever had. The company was really supportive at the corporate level, and I still have friends that work there. They pretty much left me alone as long as I made sales, so I had carte blanche to set up my stores the way I wanted, even if it didn't look like the planned merchandising setups they sent out. I had directed access with every department, so if I felt my stores couldn't sell us something they sent us, they'd let me transfer it somewhere else and vice versa. Got more of the best sellers in. Honestly, if it wasn't for the working every weekend and closing stuff, I would have continued working there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I spent almost 5 years working at one in the early 2000s. Being in the Midwest, we had a ton of juggalos, but they were actually pretty nice people in general. I had a group of kids ask what I would do if they set some clothes on fire and flicking a lighter multiple times. We mostly got weirdos who wanted to do the deed in the dressing room or lifting up their shirts to ask me what gauge their chest piercing is. We had this one girl who came in weekly, and I don't think she was all there. She'd sit at the listening station for way too long and then leave. One day she sat down and put the headphones on. She had a plastic bag with her, filled with empty glass bottles and peaches. Yes, the fruit. We noticed that it was leaking on the floor, but just let her do her thing. She put the headphones back and looked at her leaking bag. She had a mildly disappointed look on her face, but immediately looked at her watch and yelled, "I'm going to miss my bus!" And she ran out of the store and up to a trash can outside the store. She held the bag up high and yelled, "Peaches, meet your fate!" and threw the bag in the trash and sprinted off. That job was weird. Former employee of a couple of years in high school. I loved that job. The biggest horror story that sticks out in my mind was this guy that would always come in with his kids. He was a huge ICP fan, and from the looks of it, he let his kids, both boys, listen as well. They were, I guess, maybe 7 and 8 at the time. They always had Hatchet Man stuff on and pretty cool haircuts. But they were always misbehaving, just running around the store screaming, sometimes crashing into stuff, and the dad gave 0 Fs. He was often pretty rude to us in the store about not having specific merch or being out of stuff in his size. He was a large guy. I had and still have no business in what that guy does with his kids, but I always felt a little bad that there was a good chance that they'd end up in a bad way. Other than that reoccurring instance, for the most part, our store was really fun. I worked for Hot Topic for about 7 years. My store was apparently the juggalo store of the district, and I think the state. Working for that company as long as I did, I was pretty used to ignoring people's crappy taste, but the juggalos were different. This is in Central Florida, so it's on average about 90 degrees most days and always humid as hell. These kids were always very overweight, wearing a massive black ICP tee, those ridiculous 30-pound black trip pants with huge pockets and all the chains and straps hanging from them, and they were drenched in sweat. Their hygiene was almost always awful. They always seemed to show whenever a new ICP shirt or collectible would arrive and would stink up the store and pay in wadded up, sweat-soaked money. It was just all around unpleasant. The smell would linger for a bit after they left, a lingering reminder of their grossness. Well, this is my time to shine. I was helping a lady at the Disney section. She was quite particular about the things she wanted and was asking if they looked okay enough for her. Being my first job, I was really enthusiastic about being a salesperson, and I really do love Disney. So I was just hyping her up the best I could, and we're laughing together, getting along really well. And then she says, "Yeah, I wanted to get all the same things as my boyfriend's baby mama has. Is that weird?" Literally, I did not know how to respond. I said it wasn't, and I cashed her out as quickly as possible. This was my first job in my college town, and generally, I absolutely loved it. You're treated like some super cool mini-celebrity by all the little mall rats, and management was mostly great to their employees, and the work wasn't too hard in my small, low-volume store. However, there was the issue of Valentine's Day. That year, they were promoting all of these different corsets and lingerie, as well as the Get in Our Pants campaign for the skinny jeans. Management wanted the employees to try and show the corsets not just as lingerie, but as fashion items, maybe paired with the skinny jeans, to increase sales and all. So there I am on Valentine's Day in a black corset and tight black skinny jeans and boots. Way more racy than 18-year-old me with a still developing body is comfortable with. And in comes Creepy McCreeper, a 50-plus dude who says he wants to buy something for his wife, but wants some help in picking it out. Not once did his eyes look at my face. The entire time I'm helping him, he's staring at my butt or my chest and making weird comments about how I remind him of his daughter, or being uncomfortably comfortable telling me explicit details about his wife's body. He then asks me to try it on and show him so that he could see how it would look on his wife. Luckily, shy little 18-year-old me awkwardly laughed it off and got him past the register and out the store. I loved that job, but my god did it draw some weirdos. Yep, colour me surprised. Anywhere where there are minimum wage teens who can't tell you to F off for fear of losing their jobs, you'll find them. The creeps and jerks of the world, male or female, who are prepared to take advantage of that fact. May the universe drop all the pianos it can plausibly hoist on them without us losing our sense of reality. Finally, one of these where I have an actual personal story. I worked at one for about a year. You would see a lot of cringy stuff just because of the base it attracts, but nothing completely horrible usually besides one time. I was working a Saturday afternoon shift, it was about 3:30 p.m. and the store wasn't busy at all. There were only two weebo-looking guys in their 20s in the store. Then a group of 4 teens walked in giggling and looking suspicious. They went up to the weebos and start singing the Nyan Cat song. If you've never heard it, just imagine the pitch going way up on someone going nyan 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 nyan. You get the idea. Me and my co-workers were like, what the frick? One of the weebos gets aggressive and is like, step the frick back! Step the frick back! And then he frickin' grabs a chain wallet and starts swinging it at them. I call security and my co-worker is just screaming, hey, 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 just trying to stop it. One of the kids calls the weebos fat losers as he's still trying to hit them with the wallet, and he responds to their insult by calling them daddy's splooge stain fricking B-words. Of course, I've PG'd his insult up a bit. By now, 3 security guards have come in to break it up, while the silent weebo is saying the kids started it. Both parties are escorted out of different exits while we give a report on what happened. Never saw any of them again. This would also be a good question for Spencer's employees, since they're very similar but more adult-oriented. Can't tell you how many times I had to convince people they weren't in Spencer's. Where's your green herb socks, man? Oh, we don't sell that stuff. Yeah, you do. My friend bought them here. And rinse and repeat. Your friend was in Spencer's. They'd look around bewildered. Hold up. Where am I right now? My sister worked at one for a little while. One day, 2 grown men were fighting over a pop. It's like a collectible figure. Like a legit fight. She said it was like the comic book guy from The Simpsons fighting another comic book guy from The Simpsons. My sister called mall security and noped the heck out of their way. Neither one of those gentlemen got the pop. My sister had to put all the stuff back that they knocked over. I worked at one seasonally for about 6 years through high school and college. I absolutely loved working there. We had a customer come in who claimed he was a vampire. He dressed like an extra from Interview with a Vampire on a tight budget and went out of his way to insist that he was truly one of the night dwellers. He'd occasionally corner employees to berate them about this. It happened to me while I was helping him find a new pair of boots. He cornered me by the changing rooms and told me all about the women he enthralls and spoke in metaphors at me for about 15 minutes. I tried to be as polite as possible and feigned interest, but eventually he must have noticed I wasn't falling prey to his glamour, so he switched to complaining about how he has 2 different-sized feet and finding footwear is hard. Outside of customers, once we had an absolute idiot as a manager. The guy would come in and fall asleep on the tables in the stockroom or spend hours at a time in the bathroom and have us tell anyone looking for him that he was on a conference call. He'd also occasionally try to find ways to get marked out of sale merch out to his car. Once, back when we had a CD changer for the in-store music, he bought in a bunch of CDs from his car to play. One was Blink-182's Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. None of the albums he bought in were censored, which we didn't actually think about until the intro of the bonus track, Screw a Dog, came on. The store was pretty full, we both panicked, and I ended up jumping over the counter to get to the CD changer in time to hit skip. My toe caught the counter on my way over, throwing me off balance and causing me to drill my other foot, toes first, into the floor. I still managed to hit skip before anyone knew what was playing, though. Well, I worked at the Pac Sun, 2 stores down, but I knew the Hot Topic people pretty well, as they were the only ones who also smoked cigarettes. If either of us were out of smokes, we'd get one from the other. Hung out with the manager a few times at his place to smoke out. He was super into Coheed and Cambria, and we'd jam out to that. He had a wife and kid who were super nice and cooked dinner for me when I was there. I ended up moving, and on a trip back home I stopped in to see if anyone that I knew was still there. I ask about the manager guy, and the person I'm asking's face just drops. Turns out that guy was in prison for very inappropriate conduct with a minor. Former Hot Topic store manager here. At the height of the Twilight craze, and when I was still a sales associate, we had a midnight release party for the first movie's DVD. People legitimately camped out in the mall to be at that event. Generic Twilight fans, 12 to 16-year-old girls, their mothers, and the odd sprinkling of adults that were wildly out of place. Employees were encouraged to dress up in Twi merch, but me being 17 and engrossed in the suburban punk rock lifestyle, I did not participate. My store manager was not pleased about this, so she marked out of stock an outfit for me. It was a girl's size small, black heart boys who sparkle t-shirt that rode up like a crop top, the tightest jeans I've ever worn, and to top it all off, she aggressively applied eyeliner, sparkly eyeshadow, and body glitter all over me. And before anyone asks or makes the whole process into something really racy, she was in her mid-40s, overweight, and generally the most unpleasant person ever. It was humiliating, but the only saving grace is that I got so many phone numbers that night. I was drowning in high school girls who thought I was amazing. Nothing ever came of it though. Students and professors, what moment made you want to rage quit college? I got a failing score on a lab report, even though me and the rest of the group thought that we did everything in the rubric. We went to our teacher assistant's office hours later to ask about the score. She basically reversed all the subtracted points because she was taking off points for things we had done correctly. The next year, one of my lab mates got a grading position with that TA, and she admitted to him that halfway through the year she stopped paying attention to the reports and just assigned random scores. I mean, what the frick? This is a college-level course for our major. You can't do that. How can a teacher's assistant be okay with doing that to other students? And how didn't the professor catch on? You'd think there'd be many complaints from the students. I think many TAs think of TAing as this unpleasant thing that they're forced to do that no one really cares about the outcomes of, and they think of the money from TAing as something completely unrelated. They aren't necessarily wrong to think this either, since at many universities, TA positions are essentially guaranteed to grad students, so there's no real consequences of doing a bad job. As for how the professor didn't catch on, well, if nobody complains to them, then they have no way of knowing. Most students are really timid about complaining about their marks, and the ones who do like to complain about marks are often pretty frivolous about it. It's surprising what a TA can get away with. Usually, when you take any kind of math-oriented exam, like math, physics, or mechanics, you get a pack of problems slapped on your desk and you finish it in the time allotted. So you can generally blow through 90% of a test and get stuck on one difficult part for the remainder, or just have that aha moment at the end to squeeze in a few extra points. But this one guy had the bright idea of handing out and collecting each problem at 15-minute intervals. So once the problem was collected, that was it. Even if you figured out the mistake earlier, it was already too late. Hated the professor to this day. I can't for the life of me figure out what he was trying to accomplish by doing that. I had to write an essay about my feelings studying abroad, for reflection. So obviously I made the whole essay and then had to resubmit because that's not how you should be feeling. And she misspelled my name in the email. That still makes me really mad. Fricking Wiley Plus for organic chemistry homework? Ugh. When my supervisor decided that I needed to completely rewrite my master's thesis for publication to an angle that was complete nonsense and unpublishable. I missed a quiz due to a medical emergency and had the documentation of my ER visits and everything. I emailed my TA, because our quizzes were during discussion sections led by our TAs, and asked about making up the quiz. The TA told me to email the professor because it's his class policies. I emailed the professor, who then told me to email the TA because the TA is the one who administered the quiz. Well, you'd have thought that once you explained the situation to both of them, the professor would have at least been able to delegate it to the TA that way, but I guess this isn't a video for people who had their concerns addressed by reasonable and fair people, is it? Sucks to be you. First day in a particular finance class in my senior year. The professor asked, "So who here is taking other classes?" And pretty much everyone raised their hand. "And who here has a job?" Again, most of the class raises their hands. Well, that's a mistake because this class will take you at least 50 hours a week just to pass. I thought he was just trying to be hard, but then the guy behind me confirmed that the class would indeed take that much time per week, every week, just to get by because it was his third time taking the class and he was otherwise an A student. I mean, I'm sorry, but I have bills to pay, other classes as well, and other responsibilities. The time does not exist to put that much time into one class. So I did rage quit, after trying to desperately get through the class for a couple of months. This infuriates me so much. Oh my god. I can't believe anyone would be so self-centered enough to tell people they shouldn't be working or shouldn't be in other classes. Screw that butthole, seriously. He shouldn't be teaching unless he can make the work doable. During grad school, my research advisor asked me to help out another fellow grad student in their research, as both of our researchers had a lot of experimental parallels. Anyway, I spent a good 2 months of summer helping that colleague out in her experiments and data, and then my RA told me that I couldn't use any of the data that I frickin' helped create. Not only did I lose months of my precious time, but I also got no benefit other than my name being mentioned in a footnote in my colleague's paper. I was docked 10% of a final essay because I had the wrong date, so it wasn't following MLA standards. I put the date I submitted instead of the date it was due, so my final grade was a 90%. My significant other is working on her master's right now, and a couple of weeks ago the professor added a fricking massive assignment that wasn't in the syllabus, and it wasn't even going to be graded. However, if they didn't do it, it was going to count against their participation grade. A few days ago, he announced that it was actually to try and teach them to stand up for themselves. He wanted the class to tell him the assignment was bullcrap, and they all failed this little test. So infuriating. 2 things really stuck out for me. First, I wrote an optics midterm, feeling very confident and getting close to 100. I got my mark back and it was a 30%. I went to go check my exam and saw that the final grade was a 9 out of 30. I looked through my exam and found only 1 mark wrong. Turns out the TA forgot to put the 2 in front of the 9 on the total mark page. Should have been a 29 out of 30. For a weekly assignment, a TA took 50% off your mark if you didn't include a separate cover page, even if you got a perfect grade on the assignment. Oh, and they didn't tell us we needed one until after already submitting that first assignment. I was fairly confident about a final exam I'd taken, but when I checked my grade, it was a 56. I spoke to the professor and asked him to take a second look, but he refused and said it was obvious that I just hadn't put in the effort. I finally convinced him to recheck it, and it turned out that only one side of my answer sheet had been scanned. My actual grade was a 94. Thankfully, he changed my grade to the correct score, but it was still frustrating. Scantron doesn't quite belong in the same circle of hell as Pearson, but it's an honorable mention. See also iClicker. When we had to buy $400 textbooks when the previous edition could be bought secondhand for $50. The only difference between the 2 editions? The order of the practice problems at the end of the chapter. I had to take a discrete math course and the current book was the 7th edition and it was $400. First day, the professor tells us if we haven't already brought the textbook, don't. The 5th and 6th editions are 100% identical except for the practice problems, and he was assigning homework based on questions he made, not the book. Told us to buy the 5th edition because it was like $5 on Amazon. I just recently bought a $300 loose-leaf textbook for math. Now, this isn't any higher-level math, it's college algebra. Something everyone at my school has to take. Of course, it's written by my professor. Of course, it changes every year. I took it out of the shrink wrap and saw that the book was 150 pages. I leafed through it and saw that it's literally nothing. There's hardly any information, like 2 practice problems per topic and a glossary. The real information comes from a $100 access code that has more practice problems and actual information needed to complete the class. So now I'm out $300 on a frickin' paperweight and $450 on one general education class. There's nothing that can be done at this point. I can't get a refund, all I can hope for is pawning it off to some unsuspecting student for likely less than half of what I paid for. And now I'm all angry again. Frick you, Professor J. I need to go lie down. The moment I got a massive weekly group assignment that was only worth between 2 to 3%. We lost half the marks on one question because that page of the PDF submission was sideways. My advanced foreign language professor dictated that we couldn't speak English at all during the class or we'd have marks taken away. This was fine until one day a girl started coughing up blood and we all stopped to make sure she was okay and help her out. The professor took marks off because we spoke English, and I'm still frickin' angry about that. There were 13 people in that class, and all of us disputed this when we became aware that they'd taken away grades. We were informed during the next lecture. The lecturer took a voluntary leave of absence. I'm not sure if he's back at the university because I graduated before he could have come back. The language was Japanese, in case you're wondering. I tanked my GPA due to missing half a semester for a health issue. I was allowed to appeal the dean and basically get my grades tossed. I would have been out of pocket for the tuition, but my GPA would have survived. However, I had to have all of my professors sign off that they agreed the appeal was justified, and one professor refused to agree on the appeal and I wasn't allowed to turn it in. You see, some professors are basically high school teachers plus narcissism. It is absolute crap that some of these higher educators do seem to be more or less immune from the fallout of their crappy decisions. Tenure is a real weight off some shoulders, I guess. No consequences unless you outright murder your class with a bat. Oh, my math lab by Pearson. I had a rough term with my math lab. Then my next term was with the next level of hell, mastering physics by Pearson. I hope those morons at Pearson suffer as much as the people that have been forced to deal with their bullcrap. Pearson can go straight to frickin' hell. Screw schools who use this piece of crap software. It's been down for maintenance on the night of a due date so many times. And sometimes the professor tells you tough luck because you shouldn't have procrastinated. Sometimes you get an extension, but it's infuriating no matter what. I once took a class called The Internet to fulfill a requirement. It taught you how to right-click, navigate to websites, and use search engines. This was in 2005. It was also an online course. That was probably the least ridiculous thing about my first college, but it only got worse. I noped out of that school after 1 year. Thank God. Just out of curiosity, were you at Greendale Community College? I had a professor who had serious mental issues. This guy was just a raging maniac with the scariest explosive temper. The smallest things would set him off. For instance, this one girl had a bunch of papers stacked on her desk, and he asked her what it was, and she politely informed him that she was a TA and they were tests she was going to grade later. It's not like she was grading them in class, she was taking notes and being quiet. It just happened that these things were on her desk, and he shouted at her to put them away. He'd get angry when anyone asked any questions. He almost threw a chair at someone and yelled profanities. Everyone was scared of him. So myself and another student spoke to the dean under condition of anonymity since we were still in his class. The dean disclosed our names to him, and our crazy professor started cold calling us, and he gave me a B instead of an A, even though I made an A on every test and quiz because apparently my class participation was abysmal. Nobody wanted to speak in his class anyway. The whole thing was just so aggravating. There are people at the company I work for now who have been fired for less. My brother is a college professor now, and he says the world of academia has its share of arrogant, egotistical pricks. But of course, there are also nice ones. I took a course called Companion Animals. No matter what I did, I couldn't get less than 100% on anything. Missed a test, got told to make it up at home, unsupervised, got 100%. Final project completed in 15 minutes with a glue stick, poster board, and Wikipedia, 100%. It was such a joke. Granted, I thought maybe by finishing the class I could have an animal familiar like a goat or something, but that never happened. I asked a question and the teacher ignored me. Minutes later, a different student asked the same question and the teacher said, "Oh, good question," and answered it enthusiastically. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The IT situation at my undergrad was usually described as a lot of little fixes on an ancient set of software instead of upgrading. At some point, there was a comical little error where all the campus services couldn't be accessed, specifically from the campus Wi-Fi. If you lived off-campus, used mobile data, or you could go somewhere off-campus with Wi-Fi, you could get into campus services. But if you couldn't, you were screwed. Which was very likely in a small town. Probably the only places we had with Wi-Fi were our friends' houses, McDonald's, and Dunkin' Donuts. A professor got mad at us for not doing any online assignments because, well then why weren't you contacting IT services yourselves and having them fix it? You know, like we could contact IT and everything would magically go back up and be fixed. There were 2 colleges in my town, one university and one community college. I chose community college because, well, cheap. English 101. Write a 3-page creative piece on why you chose this community college. So, not knowing how to stretch "it's cheaper than university" into 3 pages, I wrote about how I struggled with menial jobs my whole life and wanted a better future for me and my family. I was actually pretty proud of it. Classic overcoming hardship story. The teacher hands it back with a C and says I didn't answer the question. I flipped. I circled the creative writing portion of the assignment sheet and stapled my graded paper to it and gave it to the department head and dean. The teacher was replaced mid-semester due to medical issues. I assumed that I wasn't the first or only one to complain about her. Screw her. All of my graded work added up to an A, but the professor gave me a C because she, quote, didn't like my attitude. I went to the dean to contest the grade, and he told me that he couldn't do anything about it because I'd have her as a professor in the future, and he didn't want to make things awkward. Instead, he gave me a CD of him playing Presbyterian hymns on the trumpet and sent me on my way. My freshman English professor alternately creeped on and bullied me both in front of the students and when everyone was gone. He failed every one of my assignments, no matter how good they were. Actually, to be more of a jerk, he graded them initially as A's or B's, but then knocked off a bunch of points for no reason, so they ended up D's and F's. The worst part is, when I reported him to the dean with all the proof, every email, and even fellow peers' testimonials, the dean told me, well, it seems like he's just picking on you, not persecuting you. Harassment isn't the word I'd use, it's more like bothersome. He just had twin kids, so that's probably why he's upset with you. I've never had a more frustrating and heartbreaking experience. Good thing now I can't even remember his name. I was assigned a project to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and to then write an essay on what it was like. I felt it was super weird and a creepy invasion of privacy. We were supposed to either not say why we were there or to just pretend to be an alcoholic or ex-alcoholic. My dad used to drink a lot and I took the assignment personally. I couldn't even look at it. A few students straight up refused to do it. I ended up giving my friend an 1/8 of green herb to make up some bullcrap essay for me. There's always some idiot in a lecture who rephrases what the professor has just said and asks it as a question to sound smart. Professor says, so based off X, we found Y to be true. And the student then answers, so does that mean Y is true because of X? It's infuriating. Yes, I've met many such punchable individuals in my brief stints in higher learning. I will say that although the performing arts has many morons with an inflated sense of self-worth in them, they are certainly rivaled and sometimes surpassed by their counterparts in universities. I'm a professor. Normally, I try to be understanding if students are just taking my class because it's a requirement, so they're rusty on some things, but once, when I was teaching Calculus 2, a student asked, "What's a derivative?" I actually gave a very quick answer along the line of, a derivative is a function that measures the rate of change of another function, but come on. This is Calculus 2, the course that comes after Calculus 1. Calculus 1 is all about derivatives. It's like going to watch the World Series at someone's house and asking, what sport is the World Series again? One time, my English teacher had asked us what profession we wanted to pursue. When it was my turn, I told her that I wanted to be a physician. I kinda came from the hood growing up and I dressed the part. I was in honors classes, but was always sort of the black sheep. Anyway, she went on in front of the entire class to say, well, sometimes we want to do things that aren't really meant for us. No student should ever be told that he or she can't achieve their goals. In the end, it's all good because I'm posting this between seeing patients after finishing my training and specializing in a field I've always wanted to specialize in. If you have a dream, don't stop until you exhaust every last effort, and never stop believing in yourself. Ever. I didn't want to take a midterm in graduate school, so I almost jumped in front of a Volkswagen Beetle in the parking lot. Not going fast enough to die or get injured just to get an extension. Decided against it and got my 78%. Had to give a presentation for a class. There were going to be lots of graphs and things, so the professor made a point of saying that we should be careful with the colors we used, because if the graphs weren't legible, he'd deduct points. I spent hours agonizing over color choices because why lose points for something stupid like that? I load the presentation on the projector and the bulb was really messed up or something. So reds, and by extension every other color, just weren't showing up properly. I was looking at my screen, so I had no idea. The professor gives me his comments and grade, and I lost points for the graphs being hard to read. I had to take this freshman US geography course that was like a 300-person lecture. The professor was in his 80s and tenured. He spent multiple lectures going over his evidence that global warming was a liberal hoax and that Al Gore was wrong, and since he was an academic, every slide on every PowerPoint was cited, and the most recent data that he used to back up his climate change denial was from 1995. He also spent a lecture on how Costco was a Chinese company using deceptive marketing practices to appear American because he didn't realize that Costco and Costco are completely different companies. I paid real money to sit in that lecture. Grr. First day of the semester, I walked into a classroom with a professor who had uncontrollable flatulence. She let the first one rip, and all of the students looked at each other confused as the professor continued her lesson almost as if she hadn't noticed. This happened every 10 or 15 minutes for the next hour and a half. Fortunately for her, outside of a few chuckles, nobody made a big deal out of it. And fortunately for us, she got her butt under control for the rest of the semester, and we never had to deal with Vladimir Putin ever again. I had a newly hired lecturer who was not long out of university. He was extremely condescending to anyone he perceived to be below his intelligence level, and he'd try and crowbar the fact that he had a PhD into any lesson or conversation that he could. A few of us also had marks that we considered suspect compared to his favorites. After a fair few disagreements with him, I dropped out, as did a couple of others not long after. I'm still in contact with a couple of people in the group. Turns out he was dismissed after the first year. Every single day I want to quit. Did the entire group project because the group I was assigned to neglected to, do the work. Handed it in with their student cards also on it because I'd lose marks if I handed it in by myself. Bear in mind this project got a first-class mark. These guys did absolutely no work towards it, and most of them didn't even turn up to the meetings. I personally lost marks because we did a post-group work review, and one of the groups said I wasn't a team player or something like that. I was genuinely considering beating the crap out of that guy and curling out a turd on his blood-soaked, twitching body. But I decided to just let the pressure drop on him down the line because it wasn't worth getting kicked out of my course. Karma will get that guy. I freaking hope an anvil fell on his wormy little head and broke his neck. And I'm not sure that literally anyone who's ever carried a group project would blame you. Makes you wonder why we never hear from the ones doing the lazing here. That guy who did nothing and threw you under the bus is a special kind of D-bag though. Normally they just shut up and say nothing. In a com-sci class last semester, we had this absolute donkey of a professor. The class was taught by 3 lecturers, in sections, but this guy was in charge of it all. He seemed like he might have been a nice guy, but he was just so condescending. More than once, I went to his office hours and basically got told I was an idiot, and instead of answering my questions, he tried to get me to answer them even though I had no idea. I had to run tests on my code, and he just told me to run more. That's all fine, whatever, he can do that. I quickly learned to go to the TAs instead. My second test I did awful, and I talked to one of the graduate-level TAs that had been in grad school for 5 years at this point, and he knew what he was talking about. He went over my test with me and said that he didn't know why I was marked so badly, and that if I submitted for a regrade, I'd probably get half of my points back, and this professor was perfectly fine with regrades. He'd given me a point or 2 back earlier for taking them off for a missed bracket like they said they wouldn't. I submitted it, and a week later I got the regrade back with, "John, stop complaining just because you did badly," and he refused to even look to regrade it. It teed me the F off, and I'm still mad about it. Also, tests and coding classes that make you write code by hand. Screw those. I can't test code with paper. I get the point behind them, but I never get code right the first time. I always test it a few times and figure it out shortly after. Just, screw those tests. What is a true fact so insane that it should be false? There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance, also known as a 52 novem decillionth, that if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand and the table would miss each other and your hand would go clean through it. Storytime, I learned this fact from a very deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there could be very well some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Radithor that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Didn't they take that off the market after some guy drank so many of them so quickly that his lower jaw fell off? Oh my god, he did. Apparently he even developed holes in his skull. That's horrifying. That poor guy. Giant squids have a donut-shaped brain so their esophagus can run through the middle. If they try to swallow too large a bite of food, they can get brain damage. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career, and he'd still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus Gretzky fact: he and his brother own the record for being the highest-scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. Every day that you go to work, you pass by more strangers than the average medieval person did in their entire life. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they're relaxed and at ease. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you'd actually see the back of your own head. The USA is the third most populated nation on Earth. If you were able to add 1 billion people to the US population today, it would still be the third most populated nation on Earth. Yeah, India and China really have one heck of a lead. Not sure that this is either a good or a bad thing, really. I will say that after living in the population desert that I currently live in, your average city in India at least would be one hell of a shock to go back to. Greenland extends east of, west of, south of, and north of Iceland. When the 22nd President of the United States, Grover Cleveland, was 27 years old, he was friends with a married couple who had a baby girl named Frances. As a gift, he bought them a high-end baby stroller for little Frances. Then, 21 years later, he married Frances and she became the youngest First Lady. Think about that. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sicknesses or feeling ill, under close control, of course. There have been studies since the 60s. There's a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake, without protein, carbohydrates, or fat intake, like no food at all. He dropped from 207 kilos to 88 and maintained it. After a follow-up check 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilos and stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anyone is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2495396. You should keep in mind for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others have attempted this after him and wound up dead. Do not try this at home. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Wagner Jurek, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infection killed the syphilis bacteria, and then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. The life of Frayne Selak, the luckiest unlucky man in the world. January 1962, Frayne is riding on a train through a freezing canyon when it fell into an icy river. All 17 other passengers died, while he escapes with a broken arm and hypothermia. On 1963, his first plane trip, he's sucked out of the plane door and landed in a haystack unscathed. 19 other people were killed in that crash. 1966, he was riding a bus when it skidded off the road into yet another icy river. 4 passengers drowned while he only received some minor cuts and bruises. In 1970, his car's engine burst into flames while he was driving, but he managed to escape before it exploded. In 1973, in yet another driving incident, his car's engine was doused in hot oil from a broken fuel pump. This caused flames to shoot through the air vents, singeing off all of his hair. He was otherwise unharmed. He had a nice 22-year hiatus from his constant pain and suffering until in 1995 he was hit by a bus, but only sustained minor injuries. Then in 1996, to escape a head-on collision with a United Nations truck on a mountain curve, he swerved into a guardrail that broke on impact. To save himself, he jumped out of his car's open door and grabbed onto a tree branch as he watched his car plummet off the cliff. Suffice to say, the guy had a complicated relationship with the Grim Reaper. Adversely, in 2003, he won $1.1 million in US dollars, and in 2010 he gave the rest of his money to friends and family as he wanted to live a more frugal life. Giraffes eat bones. When I was in Africa, we were legit surrounded by a family of 12 giraffes. Then one of them bent over and picked up a gazelle carcass and looked us dead in our eyes as it ate its leg. It was so frickin' creepy. TASER is actually an acronym for Thomas A. Swift's electric rifle. TASER. Ireland was a net exporter of food during the Great Potato Famine. More people died making the V-2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V-2 rockets: Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. That fuel had been made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways and getting extremely ill. Eventually, this simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only ever there for the free booze. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual World War II rocket fuel. Switzerland has accidentally invaded Liechtenstein 3 times in the last 50 years. On the first time, in 1976, the Swiss military got lost and ended up in Liechtenstein, so the Liechtensteiners offered them drinks like proper hosts. On the second time, in 1992, the Swiss military forgot that a certain observation post was actually not in Swiss territory, but in Liechtenstein territory, so they just said sorry and forgot about it. Then again, in 2007, the Swiss army got lost and entered Liechtenstein, but eventually realized they weren't in Switzerland anymore. Toto. So they turned back. Liechtenstein didn't even know this happened until the Swiss apologized, again, to which Liechtenstein basically said, "No problem, bro." Takeaway? The Swiss army are bad with directions. The Liechtenstein people are chill bros. The color orange is named after the fruit. Before, the color orange was called red. That's why people with orange hair are called redheads. The TSA's fail rate is over 80%. I personally know someone who in his carry-on accidentally packed a loaded 9mm, made it onto the plane and was so freaked out when he landed, he UPS'd it back home and took a Greyhound bus after his trip. I know an idiot that flew internationally with a gat in his checked luggage. It was on accident, but he's still a dumb idiot. He left out of Florida heading for South Korea with a layover in Japan. The Japanese found it and he was arrested and spent over 2 weeks in jail. They let him go eventually. A total friend of mine did the same with a folding knife. Wow, a TSA agent almost took my butter knife once. You know what? I don't think this is a shocking set of factoids to anyone. It is fascinating to me that the TSA's incompetence has been legendary for more than a decade now, and to me at least it still seems exactly the same as it was before. Ridiculous. Sharks evolved before trees did, and trees evolved before the bugs responsible for rotting did. You know, the bacteria which could eat lignin and cellulose. Thus, when trees died, they just fell over in place and lay there instead of rotting. Over time, the weight of the upper layers of the tree corpses compacted the lower levels, which eventually became the coal we dig up and use today. The coolest thing about this is since there were just so many trees blanketing the continents of the Earth that they were basically sitting on top of coal, and that whenever something like, say, a lightning strike hit a pile of dead wood, it could spark a forest fire that would rage across large swaths of whole continents, and they would last for years. Think about how frickin' insane that would look from space, or the top of a mountain. Just nothing but fire for as far as you can see in all directions. An eyewitness to Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theatre told his story on national television. He was 5 years old at the theatre and 96 years old on his televised appearance. Only 4 people have been to the Challenger Deep, the deepest part of the ocean. One of those people is James Cameron, the director of the Titanic. Since this comment was written in 2019, that number has grown to 22. From 1613 to 1620, a samurai traveled to Rome by way of Mexico. During this time, Shakespeare was still alive, Virginia had been founded for around a decade, Galileo was accused of heresy, and Pocahontas arrived in England. He met the Pope, and he was made a Roman citizen. His name was Hasekura Tsunenaga, and he was the last Japanese person to officially visit Europe until around 1860. President John Tyler, born in 1790, has 2 living grandsons. The exact halfway point of Michael Jackson's life was January 27, 1984, the same day his hair was accidentally set on fire while filming a Pepsi commercial. There was this French guy named Terrer in the late 1700s who could eat anything in any amount. He was able to eat a quarter of a cow in one day, and ate a dinner for 15 people for one meal when he was being tested. He was even able to swallow an entire eel with bones included without hesitating. When he went to the military service, they used him as a message transport. But after being captured, he went back and tried to find a cure. In the hospital where he was staying, he was suspected of eating a baby, so they kicked him out. He was average weight, and when he died a few years later, they could see inside his stomach just by opening his mouth. They suspected him of eating a baby. He was caught multiple times eating corpses in the morgue, if I recall correctly. Well, technically, he was caught drinking human blood. There's no record of him actually eating corpses or corpse parts. Not that drinking the blood of dead people is much better. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Mike the headless chicken lived without a head for 18 months. A 500-pound cigarette-smoking, beer-drinking brown bear named Wojtek was enlisted and served in the Polish army during World War II. Private Wojtek helped the Polish Corps win the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino, and he was even promoted to corporal. Following the war, he retired in Scotland. Cheetahs can't roar, but they can meow like house cats. If every single person on the entire planet took part in a rock-paper-scissors contest, where everyone paired up and played, the losers were knocked out and the winners stayed on, you'd only have to win 33 times in a row to beat all 7.5 billion people on the planet. The longest time between two twins being born is 87 days. The twins were born at Waterford Regional Hospital. Amy was born prematurely on 1st of June 2012 and Kate followed on the 22nd of August. This is in the Guinness World Records. There is no universally accepted definition of vegetable. It's a culinary and cultural term and varies from place to place. In chess, there are over 9 million variations after just 3 moves each, 288 billion different possible positions after 4 moves each. In a complete game, there are more possible positions than there are electrons in the observable universe. And yet, it's still the Sicilian every game. There were more planes destroyed in World War II than there are currently intact planes on Earth today. There's an extremely rare condition called Stoneman syndrome. It causes any of the smallest damages done to tissue to regrow into a bone. To explain it simply, people affected by this sickness slowly turn into living statues as they get older. The record for the most children born to one mother is 69. Nice. Valentina Vasilieva, a peasant from Shuya, Russia. In 27 labors, she gave birth to 16 pairs of twins, 7 sets of triplets, and 4 sets of quadruplets. If sound could travel through space, the roar of the sun would be deafening even though it's 93 million miles away. And for those of you asking, no, sound can't travel through a vacuum, and thank God. Obviously, lots of other things in the universe would change, and yes, presumably other stars and planets would make noise too. We'd probably all die screaming as the Earth itself imploded from the pressure of traveling so fast through a universe that wasn't a vacuum. One day, Mao Zedong saw a sparrow eating grain. Thinking that the sparrows were hurting China's grain supply, he and the Communist Party launched the 4 Pests campaign. The Chinese military and population killed every sparrow they could find. Embassies didn't allow the Chinese to kill sparrows on their property, so the Chinese banged pots and pans outside the embassies 24/7 until the sparrows died of exhaustion. Unfortunately for the Chinese, sparrows mainly eat insects, not grain. The locust population exploded, and 43 million people starved to death. Yep, put this one next to every other time we've tried to fix an environmental problem and caused a different one that's significantly greater than what we already have. Well done, human race. Maybe blocking out the sun to cease global warming will go differently for us. If you earned $1 every second, it would take 2,921 years to have more money than Bill Gates. We live many times closer to the last dinosaur than the first and last dinosaur did to each other. When Mount Everest was first measured, it was exactly 29,000 feet. It was reported as 29,002 because exactly 29,000 was not believable. To scale, the distance between a nucleus and orbiting electrons is 16 times longer than the distance between the Sun and Pluto. Oxford University predates the Aztec Empire by over 200 years. And for one of my favorites, woolly mammoths were still around at the time the Great Pyramids in Giza were built. Harvard didn't teach classes in calculus when it was founded because calculus wasn't discovered yet. Nintendo was founded in 1889. They ran, among other products, hotels that were essentially brothels. If you're launching from Earth, the most difficult place to reach in the solar system is the Sun. The reason for that is that if you were to fly directly into the Sun, you would first need to launch from Earth and then remove all of your orbital velocity around the Sun. Anything less will just put you into a different orbit around the Sun rather than directly into it. The amount of power required to do that directly is basically impossible currently. As an alternative, you could, for relatively little power, fly all the way out to Pluto distance, slow down much less, and then fall back into the sun. The trade-off being the travel time is now about 90 years. There are other in-between paths that could get you there for different balances of energy and time, but all of them are tougher than basically getting anywhere else in the solar system with an equivalent balance. There's a mission currently traveling to study the sun, the Parker Solar Probe. It won't be flying directly in, but it plans to make closer passes than any other probe has. It's going to make 7 passes by Venus to shed speed so it can get closer and closer to the sun. The full flight time is planned as just less than 7 years. As of this post, they are 1 week shy of a year in. I mean, it's pretty well known by now, but calculators today have more computing power than Apollo 11. We got to the moon with slide rulers and huge cojones. Horses can't vomit. If Earth was a basketball, to scale, the moon would be a tennis ball. It would orbit around 7.5 meters away, which is a lot farther than most people think. If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was a tennis ball, to scale, the electron would orbit at about 2,500 meters away. There's no ball small enough to compare how small electrons would still be at this scale. There is no good metric for the number of languages on Earth. This is mostly because linguists can't agree on what constitutes a new language and what constitutes a dialect of an existing language. The best current metric for how many languages exist is the number of translations of the Christian Bible. A fun little anecdote about the Bible translations into obscure languages, though. A missionary from our church works for a mission that translates the Bible into languages, heretofore untranslated, and adapts the books and chapters into an audiobook app. He was in a taxi in Kenya and asked the driver what his language was. The driver told him in English that he spoke Swahili. The missionary pressed him and asked if he spoke a local tribal language. The driver said he did and referenced an obscure language that he was sure the missionary wouldn't know. The missionary pulled up that language on the app and started playing the audiobook from some passage in the Bible, whereupon the astonished driver proclaimed, "That's my home tribe's language, and that's my cousin's voice." The Tyrannosaurus rex lived closer in time to us than it did the Stegosaurus. Even if 99% of Earth's population thought you were unattractive, 76 million people would still find you kinda hot. There are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Every time you shuffle a deck of cards, you've probably made an entirely unique order as compared to every other shuffle in history. You can fit every planet between the Earth and the Moon, including all the gas giants. But if you lined up all of Jeff Bezos' money from end to end, it wouldn't fit between the Earth and the Moon. It would go to the Moon and back 34 times. Jeff Bezos has enough money to make a ladder to the Moon, and to make it out of money. GPS satellites have to compensate for time dilation because time runs at a different rate in orbit. Sense of smell is molecular, meaning that molecules of what you're smelling are actually inside of your body as a result of smelling them. Think about that the next time you enter a public restroom. Yep, when you smell someone's toots, it's too late. Their poop is already in your body. Enjoy that knowledge, folks. Don't you love learning things? If you shrink down our sun to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be equal to the size of the continental United States. Space is huge. You see your nose all the time, but your brain just ignores it. Well, not anymore, thanks. The Planck scale is the smallest known unit of measurement. If you were to expand a single atom until it was the size of the observable universe, about 92 billion light-years in diameter, a single Planck unit at this scale would be about the size of an average tree. You are closer to being a millionaire than either Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos is. Well, between Jeff Bezos and I, we have the average net worth of 60 billion. Take that. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 and the first dinosaur fossil was discovered in 1819. This means that poor man went his early childhood without going through his dinosaur phase. A black widow spider's web is 12 times the tensile strength of steel. In the last 3,000 years, there were only 268 years in which there was no war going on in the world, that we know of. The phrase plastic surgery has nothing to do with the material. Plastic surgery as a field predates the development of plastics by 70 years. The two terms simply share a Greek word root meaning sculpted or reshaped. We live closer to the lifetime of Cleopatra than she did to the building of the Great Pyramids. In Florida, it's illegal to tie an elephant to a parking meter without first paying the meter as if the elephant were a car. Where in Florida do you find live elephants? And please don't say Disney World and Dumbo. In 1000 BC, a war was cancelled due to rain. I'll one-up you. Around the 500 BCs, the Medes, in modern-day Iran, fought the Lydians, from modern-day Turkey, in a war. During the war, there was a mother-frickin' solar eclipse and everything went black. Both sides freaked out and came to a peace agreement. They stopped fighting each other during the eclipse as they thought it was God telling them something. This has been known as the Battle of the Eclipse for centuries, but nobody really believed there was an eclipse. Then, scientists recently were able to backtrack and find out where every single solar eclipse happened, and lo and behold, it happened right around the date of the battle. So now it's viewed as a historical fact. A 17-inch pizza is bigger than two 12-inch pizzas. Pizza Hut is nickel and diming you. When was the sadness or cringe so bad that you just had to check out of reality for a few minutes? In 7th grade, I got my back-to-school clothes. For some reason, I thought yellow pants and a yellow Hawaiian shirt looked awesome. I was excited to wear this new outfit. We weren't wealthy, so having new clothes like this was a big deal for me. Sitting in my English class, I received a note. It said, "Are you the mustard man?" And it was signed by every person in the frickin' class. And as I read it, they all burst out in laughter. All of them. It's a moment in life where you have to laugh or cry, and either way, you die inside. So I chose to laugh, but man, kids are cruel. When I was 18 and at a carnival with a group of people I knew from school, including my longtime crush, at some point, people started dropping off from the group, getting on rides, getting food, that sort of stuff. Eventually, it was only me, my crush, and my little sister. Little as in almost 16. I kept waiting for my sister to leave too, to go and find some of her friends or whatever. After hanging out together for another 15 or so minutes, it slowly dawned on me that it wasn't him and me waiting for her to leave, but them waiting for me to leave. They shortly after became a couple for a few months. It later turned out that they got to know each other at my 18th birthday party 2 months prior. They'd never met before. When my sister got back later that evening, she later asked me, "You don't mind, do you?" I did mind. I minded very much. When my dad told me he was obligated to love me, but he didn't have to like me. I was 10 and I was absolutely crushed. I had a customer who was holding and examining an awkward, fragile, and expensive item with one hand. I asked her to please hold it in 2 hands for safety's sake. She turned to look at me. She only had 1 arm. Every single email after a job interview that says, "You meet all the requirements we ask, but unfortunately, insert reason for not hiring here." I sneezed and tooted at the same time whilst queuing at a fast food place. Because of the sneeze, the fart shot out so fast it actually hurt my butt, so I screamed, "Ouch!" as it happened. I felt like a proper C-word. Well, honestly, at a certain age, the toots just sort of happen at moments of sudden exertion like this. Past the age of 30, you're just happy when there isn't a bit, or a lot, of number 2 in there. You're welcome, everyone. Have fun looking forward to this stage of your life, kids. I found a resident at my work crying, and when asked what was wrong, he responded, "I have baby brains." For some context, I work at a traumatic brain injury center. For these types of people, this is their permanent home. And coming from someone who's usually caught in a 3-sentence loop, the self-realization was something I didn't think he was capable of. Feels bad, man. In 4th grade, my school had a fundraiser around Valentine's Day, where you could buy a carnation for $1 or a rose for $2. It would then be delivered with a message to the person of your choosing. I liked a boy in my class, so I decided to buy him a rose and write a note from his secret admirer. Well, I couldn't wait for the rose to be delivered, so I wrote a note and slid it under his book when he got up to go to the bathroom. His friend saw because, well, I'm about as stealthy as an elephant on roller skates. Friend took the note, read it out loud when the boy got back. The rose came not long after. The boy took it, looked at me, snapped the rose in half, and threw it in the trash. Also, there was the recurring instance of being the target of, "My friend likes you." "Ew, no I don't." Let me tell you, it does wonders for a girl's self-esteem, especially since my mum continued the insults at home. This happened in my high school theatre class. As a finale project, we, and a partner if we wanted, were to choose a song or monologue or dialogue to perform. I had a dear friend Emma with a brave heart. She chose that song, All That Jazz from the musical Chicago, which is a hard song even for a seasoned performer. In Emma's 16 years of life, nobody had told her she was tone deaf, nor had she figured it out herself. You could feel how uncomfortable everyone was when Emma started to sing. Luckily, we weren't a bunch of buttholes and we politely tried to sit through it. We were quite close-knit and mainly just proud to see our friends perform. Everybody had chosen their favorites and was so excited. So we were painfully letting Emma sing her way through the song until, well, cue Miss Ellen. She was hired as a front office person. She answered the phone, took care of attendants and kids whose parents called them in sick and stuff. It was her dream, however, to be in the performing arts. So stupidly, our theatre teacher took on Miss Ellen as an assistant director. None of us liked her or this idea. After the first verse, Miss Ellen began to sing the correct-ish pitch over Emma. I was horrified. Emma immediately lost all confidence she had and hurried her way through the rest of the song. The second-hand embarrassment was so tangible, it was heartbreaking. Freshman year of high school, I had a crush on a girl. All year long, we'd flirt and talk. I was too much of a wimp to ask, but not enough of a wimp to just leave it be. We left for the summer. I think to myself, man, good thing I didn't ask her out. That would have been so embarrassing. Just me trying to justify how much of a punk I was being, I guess. Next year begins, and first day back in class, I had class with her best friend. As she talks to the girls in the class, I overhear in a whisper, yeah, she, my crush, and X, her new boyfriend, have been together for a week. I never thought she'd give up on you-know-who never asking her out. I turn and see all of them giving me the side eye. Needless to say, I died inside. It was so embarrassing to say the least, and honestly a huge wake-up call. I never made that mistake again. Shoot your shot, people. 5th grade spelling bee. I made it to the school-wide level, which was the 3rd round in. First I had to beat my own class, and then beat the other 5th grade classes, and next was the whole school. My first word was biscuit. Easy. My second word was soccer. Also easy. Except for the fact that I was a bit nervous being up on stage with the whole school in attendance, including my mum who was there for support. It got in my head a little bit. I heard soccer and thought, okay, this is easy. Remember, there are 2 C's in soccer. 2 C's, 2 C's. So I step up to the microphone, C-O, and then I instantly knew what I did. I face-palmed myself in front of everyone, dead inside. Despite this realization and the fact that I'd already lost, my brain kept the letters mixed up and I spelled the rest of the word. S-S-E-R. Cosser. Any Cosser fans here? Or as you may call it in your country, buttfall. When I was about 9, I was in a school assembly. All 400-ish students and the teachers. At our school assemblies, the students sat cross-legged on the wooden floor in the sports hall. Well, I had to toot, and I assumed it would be quiet. It was not. It ended up being extremely loud and amplified by the wooden floor. At a company event. As we left, my colleagues were nowhere to be found as I walked outside. So I just waited there. Turns out they were taking a group photo without me. Once bought a bottle of Pepsi in a meal deal, but didn't have space to put it in my bag. In my infinite wisdom, I decided to pour the contents into my reusable water bottle so I wouldn't have to carry both bottles. It was one of those bottles that has the straw in it, and you flip the top up when you want to drink. I opened it up in a little hardware store later in the day, and the gas had built up in the bottle, and it spurted out like a water gun all over the wall and ceiling. I was so embarrassed and tried my best to clean it up for them, but all the staff could do was laugh. One of them told me I was stood in the perfect spot for the CCTV to pick it up and he'd be watching it back later. Interviewing a potential student who was interested in my school. He has a huge green circle around his eye. Wow, that's quite a black eye. What did he do there? I was born like this. Is that the point where you said, okay, thank you for coming in, we appreciate your time. Now please leave before my self-loathing makes my head implode and kill me. Yes, I know you haven't sat down yet. This meeting gave me everything I needed to know. Goodbye. I was on a Skype call for work with about 25 other people. I had the mic on my computer and turned all the way up, and I was typing on that computer almost continuously. About 15 minutes into the meeting, someone finally instant messaged me to turn off my mic because nobody could hear what was being said. As a neurotic and anxious middle schooler, I decided to ask a girl to the dance, but through AIM, shout out to the late 2000s. She said yes, and the majority of the class ended up finding out. I thought everything was alright until I got a phone call from somebody else telling me that it was all just a joke. Accidentally sent a picture of my female chest to my family's WhatsApp group instead of to my guy. My mum replied by sending a recipe for Yorkshire puddings. 6th grade all-day field trip to SeaWorld Orlando. Surprise period through my white shorts. All the mums who wanted to help only had tampons. I was 11 and had no idea how to use them, and there ensued an embarrassing crash course. I was devastated until a random dad saved the day by giving me his windbreaker to tie up around my waist and told me to, quote, go have fun. Thanks, random field trip dad, you saved my day. I was on a TV quiz show and totally effed up. I died inside when it was aired. I hate having to repeat a clever off-the-cuff joke because the person was focusing on their phone. There was a time when I already knew I was coming down with what I was sure was going to be an absolute jerk of a cold. Already beginning to feel a little fuzzy on the brain, I decided to make myself some chicken soup in advance to get me through the worst of it. I chopped some carrots, chopped some onions, threw in a chicken carcass, and over the course of about 4 hours, made the most incredible stock you could imagine. Then my dumb idiot self poured it through a colander directly into the sink. It took me a good 30 seconds before I realized what I'd done, and then I just sat on the kitchen floor for about 10 minutes, gazing at the opposite wall and wishing real life had a Control-Z function. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I went to an interview once where one of the 2 people interviewing me asked if I knew French. I said I knew core French, so they decided to conduct the interview completely in that same language. I can understand when someone speaks French to me. I can read and write fluently in French, but I can't for the life of me speak it. It was so bad that one of the interviewers got up and left halfway through and just didn't come back. Needless to say, I didn't get the job. I was drenched in sweat by the end of that encounter. Never forgetty. I'm not trying to criticize or hate on French people. It was just a sweaty situation that I slipped myself into that forever changed me. I have become one with the cringe. I was supposed to fill in for the coach for my son's soccer team this weekend, but plans changed. This morning I told my son I wouldn't be coaching his team on Saturday, and he said, good, dead inside. That time I left school while chatting to friends and spotted my mum's car. I got in said car and uttered the usual, thanks for picking me up, Mom, only to realize that it was not in fact my mum's car, but a complete stranger and their family. I kind of sat there for a minute, staring while my brain came to the decision that yes, this is indeed the wrong car. Perhaps I should get out. The dad just said, wrong car, and I left and I pretended that nobody saw my horrifying mistake. Being 45 minutes into a 1-hour drive to a meeting to realize that you left the main reason for the meeting at home. I crochet, and my old boss at work asked me for a scarf. He requested lilac, which I thought was odd, but he was super insistent and even sent me a color chart pointing out the exact shade that he wanted. I bought the yarn and made him a scarf, but then ran into him and mentioned the scarf again, and he started cracking up, saying that he was joking. Definitely embarrassing, but I'm glad I didn't actually bring it with me and give him the scarf only to find out he was being a butthole. I wound up giving it to another coworker who was watching the whole thing play out, and she was super appreciative. When I was about 13, my dad took me aside one night and apologized for putting so much effort into supporting my twin brother and so little into supporting me. I always assumed he was just smarter or more physically gifted. Turns out he and my mother had actively and knowingly neglected me in order to encourage my brother's achievements. It happened all through my schooling. They paid thousands for his sporting trips, and when I had the same opportunities, they just didn't have the money. Still kills me inside now. I'm doing well now, and it really only made me a more resilient person. It was a big oof when it happened, but it made me who I am. Surprising how many twins are in the exact same situation, really. And for those asking, there's no real reason given in the explanation from Dad, and nothing really changed afterwards. At 13, it was the norm, and even now it's pretty standard. I still love my dad and my brother. Dad gave me more time than most have, and he did it as a single parent, so I don't hold it against him. One night, after going to a concert with one of my friends, I dropped him off at his house, and as he was getting out of the car, he started looking for something. When I asked him what he was looking for, he said, I think I lost my green herb. He had about half of an eighth left in a baggie. He gave up after looking around a bit, concluding that he lost it at the show. Cut to about 10 minutes later, and I, on the way home, got pulled over for not coming to a full stop at a stop sign. As the cop approached the car, the thought of my friend's lost bag crossed my mind. The cop went through the usual routine. He asked for my license and registration, asked where I'd been that evening, had I had anything to drink, is there anything in the car he needs to know about, and I answered everything flawlessly. But then as he's standing there, I see something catch his eye as he's looking in, and he shined a flashlight inside on it and asked, "What's that?" I died inside when I looked over and saw, perfectly framed in the spotlight, my friend's little baggie of Mary J on the passenger side floor. How my friend didn't find that while looking around, I'll never understand. Somehow, I was able to articulate my case that it wasn't mine, but my idiot friend's, well enough that the cop took pity on me and just confiscated it and let me off with a warning, plus a $70 ticket for the stop sign. Well, I hope for his sake that your friend didn't have the nerve to get on your back about losing the green herb, after nearly getting you in that much trouble. But if you guys were anything like I was at the age where I still went to concerts, like poor and kind of a butthole, I understand that that was probably the basis of an argument later. Last year, a work friend of mine died. After his funeral, a large group of us went to a pub to have a few drinks in remembrance of him. Somebody suggested to get a group photo of everyone there. I was asked to take the photo. It probably shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, but it did. My girlfriend decided she liked my best friend more, broke up with me, tried to get with him, but he friend-zoned her right off the bat. It was sad for a long time, but now I think it's hilarious. When I was in high school, I used to swim competitively, so Speedos, hat, among other things. One morning session, I was running a bit late and got changed super quickly and went out to the poolside with my gear, getting ready for the training session, when one of the girls, who I happened to fancy at the time, informed me that one of my family jewels was hanging out the side of my Speedos. I thought it felt a bit breezy as I ran out of the changing room, but it never crossed my mind what had happened. I look back and laugh about it now, but my gosh, the embarrassment at the time. I still wonder how many others saw and didn't say anything. Ugh. I once created a painting for a friend, hung it up on the door to my apartment as a surprise. It was easily bypassed. He asked, "You let people put crappy vacation ads on your door?" Never again. For those asking, I live in West Virginia. It was a painting of one of our favorite spots that we'd seek when hiking. This happened in Morgantown and it's called Blue Hole, not really sure of the actual name of the river. He showed me the place. Lots of people go swimming there, but he knew a secret spot. It was a view from the exit of the trees to our favorite area. Honestly, a lot of people had things like that in Morgantown and around the state, which is why I think he easily overlooked it. I didn't tell him at the time. I was so embarrassed and I was glad he didn't figure it out. Eventually I did tell him when we were drunk, yay liquid courage, and I could see everything click in his head. He was sorry, but we've gotten past it. The setting, junior high. Status, awkward preteen. Style, liked cats and very shy. Walked out of the school bathroom. Noticed after a bit that the popular girl in school was watching me, giving me a strange look. She then approached me and wordlessly pulled my skirt out of my undies that I'd just tidily tucked in with the rest of my uniform. I then just walked away to avoid my shame, as I'd been walking around with my undies showing. Ugh. I was in a busy post office with my daughter, who was 3 at the time. I was wearing track pants and going commando. I was talking to the clerk and my daughter pulled my pants down right to my ankles. I thought I was going to die of embarrassment. The entire lineup of people behind me saw my bare butt. On the flip side, she's 14 now, so we laugh so hard at it. If she ever happens to come to the post office with me, which is very rare nowadays, I tell her to not pull my pants down. It's the little things. I guess my one is my birthday. Since my dad died an hour before it, my uncle died the night of it, really early the morning after, and my aunt almost died on it but managed to make it another month. At least it was separate birthday years. Thank you for clarifying it was different years because I was about to say that's the most effed up thing I've seen so far, but I'm sorry for the loss anyway. When I realized I lost my passion for writing and playing music and quit my bands, and they both had success after I left. That was 10 years ago, trying to get my groove back now. No, I don't think I'm going to tell you about them, but if you follow post-rock or experimental music, you might have heard of them. They're successful as in the music is getting heard by a lot of people and they're touring, but they still have jobs when they're at home. I was 15 and somebody was taking a photo of my girlfriend at the time, and she goes, "Make sure you don't smile. You're ugly when you smile. You look much better when you're serious. Don't want you ruining another photo." It was not a joke. That killed me so hard. I'm 34 and I still struggle to smile in front of people. In short, girlfriend tells me I'm ugly when I smile, but that incident was just a small piece of a larger puzzle. Please always consider everything you say before you open your mouth. I was on a school trip to a preschool and I had bad gas. I was chilling on the floor and this little girl jumped on my stomach and I ripped one so freaking hard. Walked halfway across campus before a random guy let me know that I had a string of toilet paper hanging out the back of my pants. And there was poop in there too. Just kill me. Was watching a lesbian adult film and I accidentally casted it onto the main TV in the living room where my parents were watching TV. Honey, there's something different about this episode of Days of Our Lives. Can't quite put my finger on it. Oh my god, what are they doing? When I went to the pool with my family, my aunt forgot my cousin's activity access card. Basically, in our town, you get this one-of-a-kind ID card where it allows you to get books at the library, prove you live in the town, and in this case, go to the pool for free all summer. Otherwise, you pay $10 to get in. My aunt is usually the most chill person ever. I assume she's going to pay it, so I take my 10-year-old cousin towards the female side of the changing room and then, hey, you two aren't going anywhere until I fix it with this witch. I turn around. My aunt is yelling at Karen style at this poor summer worker that must be about 14, saying that she always comes to this pool and it's unacceptable to make her pay when they always have the card. My cousin had to stay and watch through the gates because she couldn't go in, and my aunt just took the car and left. I paid so that she could come in with us instead of, crying her eyes out because her mum can't be damned to pay $10. The aunt came back huffing with the card and nearly threw it at the employee before even realizing her daughter wasn't in front, but in the pool. She didn't even look for her. I wanted to die. When you're having a conversation with your friends and you keep getting talked over like you never said anything, and by the time someone does acknowledge you, the subject has changed, so they all give you a weird look for being so behind, and it keeps happening, and you realize that these people aren't really your friends, you're just kinda there. What's the biggest sign that somebody just wasn't raised right? A lack of personal accountability. They can never admit wrongdoing on their part. It's always someone else's fault to them. And it's often because immature parents don't realize they should model this behavior by apologizing to their children when they, the parent, do something wrong. When you don't respect your kids, they can become disrespectful jerks. Someone that does things to intentionally hurt another person's feelings after they've expressed that certain things can hurt their feelings. You give them a lift and they leave rubbish in your car. I forgot my candies and trash in a carpool 6 years ago and I still remember it. The driver rushed us out because he made a mistake, to be fair, but my frickin' brain won't forget that. Who are the guys who spit their chewing gum into urinals? I see this all the time at work, and I work in a high-end corporate place. Do they think it dissolves and goes down the pipe? The janitor has to pick that stuff out. Gross. I worked at a truck stop with 3 bathrooms, a men's, a women's, and a unisex single one in the trucker lounge. The stall in the men's was out of service because people didn't understand what a reasonable amount of toilet paper was. This guy comes in and the truck bathroom is occupied. He goes to the men's, the stall is out of service. Do you think that this man, A, waited for the trucker room, B, just went to the women's, which was also just a single room and wasn't used much, or C, went number 2 in the urinal, then came out and complained that I should lose my job because the stall is out of order? Take a guess. Take one frickin' guess what this guy did. Those people who make messes in public areas and then just wander off, leaving trash in the theater or not flushing or leaving the cart in parking spaces. Working in a theater, I can tell you a good number of people treat the place as their personal dumping ground. And that's apart from the people who make big messes and just skedaddle. I'm talking about the people who spill their XXL soda and just walk out. I've had the pleasure of walking into a theater and finding 3 separate pools of throw-up one time. Like, what the frick, people, honestly? Oh wow, I've never seen anything quite like that last example in a theater. Things that were pretty unacceptable, like just popcorn radiating outwards from where some kids had been sitting like some sort of frag grenade, but never just private pools of people's bodily fluids like you've described. How they act as a boss when their employee messes up. Yelling and belittling shouldn't be your first option. This was what made me respect the absolute heck out of my manager. I made a mistake on a job a while back, like a big F-up that cost us a large sum of money. I was fully expecting to get chewed out and if you screw up again, you're out the door message, because that's how previous managers had treated us. And it's no wonder we had a horrific management and employee turnover rate for years. But no, my boss came over to the car that I was working on, looked at what had happened, figured out how the mistake was made, and we talked about it for a couple of minutes. I was pretty upset about it because I'm not usually the type of tech who's negligent and makes mistakes. So when I do, it profoundly bothers me. He saw that, he listened to what I said, and he went through the process of getting replacement parts ordered for what I'd messed up. The next morning he came to me again and said, I was thinking about you last night after I got home and thinking of what you could do to prevent this mistake from happening again in the future. He gave me a few suggestions for the future and closed the conversation with a pat on the shoulder and we won't need to have this conversation again, brother. I trust you. It was the most meaningful conversation that I've ever had with a manager. I got the sense that he really wanted to see his employees succeed and grow. It gave me confidence in a moment in which I had none left. Disrespecting people for doing their job. I worked at an office supply company while I was in college. Let's call it paperclips. I had a full-time position as an inventory specialist on top of going to school full-time, and let's just say I was going through a bit of a rough patch in life. During back to school in late September, this little girl comes in, escorted by what I can only describe as an alpha Karen. The kids started pouting and saying that she didn't want to go back to school. I was busy running my cycle count report when the alpha Karen pointed at me and said something along the lines of, "If you don't go back to school, you'll end up working at paperclips like this guy." Oh, that made me mad. I don't remember exactly what I said in response, but it essentially went like, "Mom, I am graduating from university in 3 months and I have a job lined up at a local hospital. I hope your daughter does work here or at McDonald's, so maybe she'll learn the respect you didn't teach her." That's the only time I've ever been written up for a customer interaction, and I don't regret it. How they treat people from whom they have nothing to gain. These people who always portray themselves as the victim. Nothing is ever their fault and somebody is always out to get them. Let me share a story. Part of my job is to fingerprint people for background checks. I had to come to work, look at my appointments, and then do them. I'd just finished a 10:30 appointment and was about to call for my 10:40 when I was interrupted by this daughter and father combo. They said that they'd been waiting for 30 minutes and when would we get to them? I looked at my schedule. Strange. I'd taken everyone in on time, so I figured they were just here super early. I asked them for their appointment paper or screen from their phone and they go nuts. "You're just making us wait and then you don't trust us?" And I have to kind of reassure them, "Listen, I just need to see it so I can see what time your appointment is." "No, you bring your boss out here right now." From prior experiences, I knew there was no reasoning with these kinds of people, so I asked the receptionist to call for my boss while I bring in my 10:40. My boss is able to retrieve their ID and we call headquarters to find out when in God's name their appointment was. Turns out they didn't even have one for that day. Turns out they had a 10 a.m. appointment 3 months ago in another city in another state. I let them know about this and they go, "No, we have one today." So I show them my schedule. "Look, you're not here on time, you don't have an appointment today. It's right here, learn how to do your job. You wasted our time, her name is right there." I look at her ID and it's a completely different name. The daughter, who is at this point crying and playing victim, is trying to blame us and along with her father interjects, "That's my nickname on your schedule." I look at her blankly. "So you're telling me you came to get fingerprinted through a government organization and instead of using your real name, you used a nickname which bears zero resemblance to your legal name." And she starts wailing, "It's not my fault! It's not my fault!" They started threatening to sue us because we won't fingerprint them, because their daughter is missing work hours, because we're keeping her here. My boss and I just look at each other and smile, realizing the idiots we're dealing with. He tells them, "We're not paying you guys anything." The dad starts making a scene again. "I'm going to call her employer and tell her not to bring customers to your facility anymore." And my boss is okay with that. Truth be told, doing fingerprinting was just a service to our county. We actually lose money every day paying me for the position because the fingerprint company paid so low. We're just third-party contractors. Anyway, eventually we give them the boot, but I still remember the girl wailing away, "It's not my fault, it's not my fault." And all I could do was glare at her with a look that said, "It really is your freaking fault." Screw parents who don't teach their children to take responsibility. The people to whom the word no is apparently a cue to just throw a fit and be as obnoxious as you can be until you get your way. No doesn't mean that rules are rules or someone's job might be on the line. They're the important ones, nobody else. I'm an overnight manager, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., in fast food. After midnight, our menu changes slightly so that we don't do certain items, and the loose change menu isn't in effect. All of this is in the ads for such items, mind you. But when I tell someone, "Sorry man, I can't do that for that price at this time because the registers automatically switch over at midnight. There's nothing I can do," people have a frickin' fit, let me tell you. I've had people break windows, pull out a metal bat from passenger seats and threaten me. People report me, spit at me. Fricking children, all of them. We also close the store and go drive-through only after 11 p.m. because it's just me and one other guy and we can't keep an eye on the whole store by ourselves. We also aren't allowed to accept people walking up to the window because of our insurance. It's much easier for them to just reach us and the register. The amount of times I've said no to people and they get angry and threaten me, Like, you going crazy is exactly the reason we don't accept walkers. I've even had 2 guys try to read my name badge and ask me when I finish and what my address was. People get so riled up over a bloody Big Mac. Yeah, this one goes right along with the earlier point of people not respecting others who are just doing their jobs. Honestly, you gain nothing from beating up the teen who's working the till at Burger King. Disgusting behavior. Not respecting personal boundaries. If you're wondering why someone has these sorts of issues, take a look at their parents. Dear God, I used to be friends with a guy who was just like this. I made the mistake of talking him through some difficult things, and he took that to mean that I wanted him present 24/7. He'd see that I was hanging out with someone else and then text me, bugging me to ditch that person and hang with him instead because he was sad and lonely. Look, I understand not wanting to be sad and lonely, but you can't make me ditch all of my other friendships to fix that. How they treat animals and people without power. I remember hearing as a kid about a Native American belief that really stuck with me. After you die, and as you're entering the afterlife, you must cross a bridge. This bridge is filled with every animal you had a personal encounter with in your lifetime, and together they as a whole decide your fate. Whether or not you can cross the bridge to heaven is up to these guys. This was the first and only time I've heard of your fate being decided by animals. Oh man, there's no way those mosquitoes are going to forgive me though. Oh, it's okay. They're collectively sent to hell by the entire animal kingdom. People who don't take responsibility for their actions. People who litter. If you throw your crap on the floor, then you 1. Have no respect, and 2. You're a tramp. We went for a trail walk that leads out towards a dam and some rock formations with mini waterfalls. Broken beer glass was strolled along the entire trail. It was an hour-long walk, you guys, and the amount of garbage at the falls was honestly mind-blowing. Like somebody had bought 10 or so full bags and just busted them all over the place. It's one of the few natural areas in that city, and it just sucks so much that people care so little. It doesn't take much effort to just not destroy a nice thing with your litter. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I know a bunch of people who clearly weren't raised right. They tend to have one or more of the following traits. They're disrespectful to everyone, not just authority figures. Watch how they treat customer service or retail staff. They have no manners in general, or only use manners when they absolutely have to in order to preserve their own interests. They're cruel to people and animals and laugh at the suffering of others. They're selfish. They destroy things, steal, and cheat. Some of them also commit more serious crimes. They expect handouts from everyone. They shirk hard work and responsibility whenever they can. They complain a lot and constantly act like they're a victim. They're terrible parents to their own children. Turning conversation back to themselves at all costs. Being a good listener is a sign of a person raised well. And to clarify, I don't mean quiet or a doormat, I mean generous, empathetic, supportive, and curious. Good follow-up questions without making it about oneself. That kind of thing. I'm going to answer this literally. As a teacher, I see that there's a lot of different values that go into parenting styles. Some that aren't my values but still raise a productive, responsible, and successful child. But there's evidence of bad parenting from a child development point of view. If the kid is extra clingy and implies or outright states that you're their sole custodian for their well-being. If they're incredibly aggressive about getting their way or being correct all the time. If they respond to slights or inconveniences violently. If they're extremely withdrawn and don't care for themselves. Then on the flip side, if they're very self-sufficient from a very young age and also have anxiety or depression. If they seek attention constantly, not just a lot, but constantly. And obviously the signs of child mistreatment are indicators of them not being raised right, and here they are only applying to actual children, but it never hurts to remind people of them. If they have suspicious bruising or injuries on their body where it's not normal to have injuries, like a bruised forehead and skinned knees are normal on toddlers, but black eyes are not. They carefully cover parts of the body that would not normally be covered. Like they won't roll up their sleeves even a little on hot days, which is definitely a concerning sign. If they're weirdly afraid to be alone with another person, not just I don't want to go home because my dad's going to give me a whooping for starting a fight at school, but something like finding a lot of excuses to not hang out with an older cousin ever. If they're often dirty or stinky or soiled, and if they look underfed. If they never say please or thank you. My parents were super sticklers for rules and manners growing up, but they never said please or thank you in restaurants. It was so embarrassing eating out with them. I've seen that several times. The biggest example that comes to mind is a military family that I've known my whole life. And by no means am I ragging on military families, it's just that where this particular family derived a lot of their identity. They'd always been big on yes sir and yes ma'am, no sir and no ma'am. Their kids all grew into super respectful, awesome adults. But the parents, rude as heck to waitstaff. I don't enjoy being out with them, and my family always felt we had to compensate with a bigger tip, since they're nightmare customers and insulting tippers. As an adult, I choose to spend time with their kids, but not the parents. My parents are starting similar distancing. They don't know how to do normal household stuff. I've seen people that don't even know how to make their own coffee or clean a toilet. My God, that's me. My mum won't let me touch anything because I, quote, don't know how to do it. Well, no crap, you never taught me and you don't believe I Googled it? I can't wait to move out and feel like a functioning human. My mum is exactly like this, my God. I remember last week I decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to cook something, and if it fails, who cares? So I proceeded to go tell my mum that that's what I intended to do. I know, it seems dumb to even tell her in the first place, but if I hadn't, then she'd have let all hell break loose. And she was just like, no, nope. Like, for frick's sake, I can literally do everything basic, like vacuuming or cleaning, whatever you need, but I have never cooked, and she's the sole reason as to why. Maybe this is embarrassing to put out there, but frankly, I don't care. They think handling a disagreement means shouting, attacking someone's character, name-calling, or breaking things. I swear to God that I've never met a person like this older than their teenage years. I know that they exist because I read a lot of stories about terrible, terrible relationships with people like this who control their partners until said partners escape, but there's a reason you don't meet people like these at parties or anything. It's because nobody's inviting them. It's a concerning sign when they apologize for every little thing. Probably a sign that they grew up with horrible bullying parents that got mad over anything and everything. In their spare time, they dress up like a bat and beat up the mentally ill. If they whistle, snap their fingers, or make that pss-pss-pss sound to get their server's attention in a restaurant. I snapped my fingers to get a teacher's attention once in middle school. She barked at me something fierce, and I learned my lesson. Not putting the cart back at the grocery store. My dad forced me to leave it once because he had an adult tantrum at the store. I feel bad when I think about it. To explain, my dad and I were once at a grocery store and the entire shopping trip went fine until the end. Dad and I decided to go to the self-checkout. The machine worked just fine, and then I scanned an item, it was the last item to be scanned, that could be both weighed or scanned via barcode, but I chose to weigh it instead for some reason. One of the attendants monitoring the self-checkout area said something along the lines of, "Oh, you can scan that item as well," and my dad just flipped out. He was basically being a male Karen, but luckily didn't ask for the manager. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was embarrassing. Then he decided to grab all of the stuff we got and leave the store after we checked out. He said he didn't need the cart while carrying everything he bought. It was a lot, but just like 5 or 6 bags, so doable. He told me to leave the cart at the register and said to me, "Oh, just leave it. Smarty at the register can put it back." If anyone is about to ask, "Why didn't you take the cart anyway?" at that point he most likely would have yelled at me for frickin' doing so. In short, my dad flipped out over a clerk doing her job and told me to leave a shopping cart at the register. I still feel bad to this day. We know someone that won't get a checking account or direct deposit because, quote, "the banks just steal your money," and he takes his paychecks to a check cashing and payday loan shop instead. We also know his mum, who's in her mid-40s and on her 3rd bankruptcy. Not discounting the likelihood that mum destroyed his credit long ago and would still empty his account today if given the chance, which still falls into the raised wrong category if you ask me, but we're talking about a 20-year-old guy living with a mum, no rent, no car, and no kids that shouldn't have any substantial debts or expenses of his own to make overdraft fees an issue. If they don't actually listen to what you're saying and they're just trying to formulate a response, I just want to clarify what I mean. The person I'm thinking of who does this, they do this as a means of not really caring about your opinion, just trying to make you look inferior, rather than listening to why you feel the way you do. They want to try and just prove you wrong. I hope that makes sense. Like not being interested in having a discussion, more interested in showboating their own opinions or beliefs or experiences. I think that makes someone selfish, therefore maybe not raised right. I could be wrong. They act like mental illness is something you can just get over. It's all just in your head kind of thing. I have an uncle who's a complete drunk. He gets off work and it's straight to getting drunk as possible until it's time to sleep. This guy kept telling me anxiety was a joke and that I don't have any problems. That hurt coming from a relative. Then I told him it is all in my head because it's a mental illness, and that teed him off and he tried fighting me. Then, after trying to fight me, he called the cops and said I had a substance on me, my meds. He tried to get me arrested. I was in a bad place in life and needed a place to stay. Obviously, this was the wrong person to trust in helping me. The ones who one-up you all the time. They only compete with you when they're winning and brush you off when you're achieving things. People who don't offer to help you clean up when they're visiting you, like having friends over and them leaving you with all the beer bottles, bowls, and glasses on the table. I don't mind cleaning up, but I always offer when at someone else's house. You make the mess together. We lost a beloved pet today. One of our friends said, "Time to get another." This all happened in the same day. I'm not sure if he's stupid, insensitive, or just an idiot. We're not friends anymore. Well, some people actually cope with their pet death by immediately replacing the pet. For them, it's easier to grieve while being distracted by a new creature. And they don't understand why anyone would process their grief in any other way. I mean, your friend could be a butthole. He could also just simply process things differently. If you go to someone's house and they cook for you, you eat it with a big smile and lots of thanks, even if it was garbage. My wife brought her friend over for lunch. I made pierogies and she goes, "Oh, that's not a meal, that's a side," and goes to get Quiznos. It blew me away. Somebody's hospitality is the deepest respect they can show you. You have to give it back. How conscientious you are of that scenario is a good sign on how you were raised. If they don't ask about or say hi to your family members when they come over. I've seen people completely ghost my parents as they walk through the house, and I couldn't wrap my head around it honestly. I realized that a lot of people may actually be forced into this by any form of anxiety or any mental issues or traits they have. I just wanted to clarify that this is not targeting those people at all, just the people that straight out were never taught that this isn't polite, or knew that and never acted on it. If someone thinks hurting or treating an animal inhumanely is all right. I love animals, especially my cat and dog. I speak out when I see someone treating their dog poorly. It really reflects at the dog parts and how their pet reacts. They gossip about others and will be vindictive behind people's backs, but pretend to be sweet to their face. So, whatever this kid turns out to be is the answer to your question. I follow some trashy people from grade school on social media. There's one that's also posting memes for garbage like, "If your girl suck eggplant like this, you know she loves it," or "I want a man that's dirty enough to F in the bathroom at family dinner." She has an 8-year-old kid. My future fiancé and I sometimes look and think, could you imagine if we friended the mum of our 3rd grader and this was her frickin' social media? My god. We aren't in contact, but I'm almost certain that this kid will not be raised right. What is the most ridiculous thing that you've been asked to do at work? I was once asked to not go to my uncle's funeral. I was told, and I quote, "Well, he won't know you're not there." I quit very shortly thereafter and reported the manager to executive management. Jerk. My mom got fired because she missed one day of work ever to go to her father's funeral. She'd worked there for 3 or 4 years and never missed a single day up until that point. Retired paramedic. I was told to immediately place a freshly delivered newborn back inside the mother. She delivered in a transport ambulance en route to Weill Cornell, and lost it that her baby wasn't born in a hospital, and further, not born in a good hospital. The mother told me to hold the baby in with your fricking hand, and I explained that that wouldn't work, and that we were having this child on 3rd Avenue in the middle 50s, and she flipped. So she and I had an agreement that I'd say the baby was still inside her body till we backed up at the hospital. I guess this satisfied the requirement of being born at the hospital versus next to the dry cleaners on 3rd Avenue. So far as that kid knows, she was born in the Weill Cornell ER ambulance bay. I got asked by my boss to go to the building site next door and just ask the builders to stop construction as they were being too loud. Not for a specific length of time, just to stop working. I had to ask him what he thought that would actually achieve. A while back, there was a carpenter renovating the office next to ours. My boss went next door and yelled at him, "You should do this after hours. Do you like listening to hammering and sawing all day while you're at work?" And the carpenter said, "Actually, yes, I do." I was asked to lay off a group of employees for another manager. She begged me to do it, and I initially refused. This manager selected and approved the list of people being let go, and was 100% responsible for even needing a layoff. She overhired in her area because she misrepresented her projected needs and let her group's performance fall below standard. Nobody wants to be a part of a big layoff on the receiving or giving side, unless you're a total sadist. And I really believe if you're laying your people off, you need to have the stones to do it yourself. Period. I wound up doing it because everyone in the building already figured out something was happening based on her behavior, and it seemed excessively cruel to postpone things since everyone was on edge. I felt like the angel of death that day. People wouldn't even make eye contact with me as I walked the halls because if I stopped at someone's desk, they knew they were losing their job. My people were terrified, and I still feel terrible about how that day went down because I couldn't say anything until it was done. Layoffs are horrible, and this manager hiding from her responsibility made it even worse. Fortunately, my boss agreed, and he fired her for it. Oof, well, at least there was some small justice in this one instance. Often these people responsible just walk away completely scot-free, having learned very little to nothing. It sucks that you had to be the one to clean up their mess. Back when I was the manager of a movie theater, I'd just got done working 14 hours because somebody else had called in sick. I tried to submit payroll to accounting, and the fax wouldn't go through. I asked the accountant to go to the office, about 2 blocks from her home, and see if she could fix it. She said that she was too tired and that I should instead drive the 50 miles to hand deliver it. I ended up doing it because if I didn't, then my staff wouldn't get paid. But there were about 8 nasty emails I sent afterwards to various higher-ups. A few weeks later, I quit that job to become a busboy. Single best career move I've ever made. Not as horrifying as some of the others, but in the early 90s I worked at a well-known US depot for office supplies. One time, for reasons that I'll never understand, an edict came down that a certain class of inventory was to be destroyed and discarded. That meant perfectly good merchandise, including office furniture, lamps, computers, printers, copiers, fax machines, and some other random bits were to be taken out back and literally smashed to pieces with a hammer, then thrown in the bin. The most amazing part was that under no circumstances was this stuff allowed to be given away, sold, or otherwise allowed to survive or benefit anyone. Several employees begged and pleaded to be allowed to buy some of the things, but nope, better to destroy it and get nothing in return. It wasn't a huge number of items, but it was easily 10 grand worth of stuff. We used to have to destroy hundreds and hundreds of books at my job, and we weren't allowed to do anything with them but put them in the recycle bin. This is called stripping a book. I felt like my heart was being ripped out when I had to strip my favorite books and throw them away. Was asked to clean up a bathroom full of doo-dee. My training specifically said that I was not to clean it, but rather close off the section and leave the manager to do it. Yep, you don't have to do it. Even if you have an actual retail job which states in your contract that you have to do general cleaning, cleaning fecal matter isn't general and should be left for cleaners or managers. Worked in many retail jobs where the manager would try and get people to do that rather than hire a full-time cleaner. I was asked to do this QA thing before the week's end. When I asked if she wanted me to wait until next week because otherwise I got into overtime, she responded by saying, "Do it this week, but put it into next week's payroll." No. That made me so angry. To clarify, in my situation, I wasn't required to provide a notice. I was simply being nice. I don't care too much about the cash. I figure what's good for the workplace is good for me. So this is why it angered me so much. Also, she did this kind of thing all the time. I was once ordered to rake up pine needles. All the pine needles. At a camp named Pinewoods. Aptly named. I was working as a desk-side technician for an IT company a couple of years back, when one day it was quiet and we didn't have much to do. So my boss had me pick grapes from his plant at his house. I used to work in a food processing plant when I was in high school. The job sucked, it was hot on the lines, and the place smelled horrible. I got told by my boss that I had to go outside and pick up cigarette butts from the sidewalk where the other workers went outside during breaks to smoke. I wasn't a smoker, and I was pretty angry at first, but being outside picking up nasty cigarette butts was actually more enjoyable than working inside on the lines. I had a serious reevaluation of my job that day. Yeah, I worked at McDonald's in high school, and there was a task called the Continental, which involved picking up all of the McDonald's garbage in a 3-block radius of the store. It was more enjoyable than working inside, even in the depths of winter in Edmonton. I was an Army officer, and at the time, a company commander. Not only was I instructed to assist in the sweeping of an unspeakable act offense under the rug, but I was ordered to appoint as my acting company first sergeant, top sergeant for the company, a man I'd relieved of his duty position and assigned to a desk for misconduct with female trainees. I refused and actually got the unspeakable act victim the medical and mental assistance she needed. He was still assigned the post by a higher command, and less than 2 weeks later I lost my command for creating a work environment so hostile I'd lost the confidence of the NCOs and sergeant. I still don't regret it, even though it eventually cost me my career. I was asked to not have to go to the bathroom. I'm dead serious here. My boss recently told all the employees there will be no more bathroom breaks. Considering we already don't get a second break and some of us don't get a lunch either, yeah, that's illegal. Got told to work for 2 months without being paid as a trial to see what kind of employee I would be, before he decided if he was going to offer me a paid job or not. Also, it was a commercial aeroplane pilot job, not an entry-level position, and for the love of all things chocolate, this was not an internship. He was somewhat surprised when I declined the offer. In the army, I was told to pull weeds in Iraq before a congressman came to visit. Oh man, this war must be going well. Look at this landscaping. My first job was in retail. I smelled something funky near my break room. I went to check it out and found dried-up diarrhea on the ground and went and told my manager. He asked me why I was telling him and not busy cleaning it. Turns out everyone knew but didn't say anything because they didn't want to clean it. Frick my life. I'm in the Navy and I had to sweep water off the pier as it was raining. Told to get onto a forklift that had a piece of plywood thrown on the forks without a harness and an air hose put into my hand, and then I was lifted about 20 feet into the air and got told to clean the rafters of the wood shop up. After about 5 seconds of spraying, the dust cloud got so thick you could barely see. Isn't that pretty much word for word the example OSHA gives on what not to do with a forklift? Yeah, I'm fairly certain that I've seen some exact health and safety diagrams essentially telling people to just not stand on top of pallets being lifted by forklifts, and that if they do, they will spontaneously combust and kill all their friends and loved ones, or something like that. I wasn't really paying attention. Worked at a grocery chain as a courtesy or utility clerk. The vendor for 7-Up and Dr. Pepper screwed up stacking their pallets, so they all fell over, creating a nice pile of broken glass, sticky soda, and wet, messy cardboard. Boss made me clean it all up and told me to not leave it even for a second. I got it all cleaned up in about 2 hours. Not bad, save for me nearly getting shanked by some large glass shards on the floor. But where it became unreasonable was the very next day, where I got called into the office and written up by the same boss. Why? I'd failed to do floor inspections. He expected me to be able to be in 2 places at once. So that was fun to contest. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was 18, I worked part-time at UPS, and also part-time at Burger King, which was more of a way to eat for free every day than anything else. This was in 2000 or 2001, so the minimum wage was still $5.15, and I wasn't making much more than at BK. I'm working the drive-thru window one night when a visibly intoxicated couple came into the dining room and ordered some food. My manager was working register, and one other guy was there cooking the food. The drunks order a bunch of deep-fried stuff, and we didn't have enough chicken tenders on hold, so the manager tells them it's going to be a couple minutes while the tenders and fries cook. No problem, they're going to go use the restroom. The restrooms were down a hall, and the doors faced each other, so we didn't think anything of it when they went down the hall together. Their order comes up and they're not back yet, so we bag it up and leave it under the heat lamps while we wait for them. 2 minutes turns into 5 and I'm busy on the drive-thru window, so I kind of forget about them. An indeterminate amount of time goes by, probably 15 minutes, maybe half an hour, and my manager asks me if I expedited that order, meaning give them their food. I tell her no, they never came back for their food after going to the bathroom. She goes to the women's room, doesn't see anyone, and then opens the door to the men's room. I heard her dry heave from my station at the window, a good 20 feet away. She came around the wall that separated the dining area from the work area, and it looked like she'd just seen a ghost or a dead body. I asked her what was wrong, and she just shook her head, telling me that she'd take over drive-thru window because I had to clean the bathroom. I geared up, elbow-length gloves, goggles, dust mask, and slickers, not knowing what kind of heck was unleashed in that stall. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw in there. It looked like they'd hooked up a colostomy bag full of mostly liquid crap and semi-chunky throw-up to a paint sprayer and had blasted every single surface in there with the crap puke. The stall was caked, the door handle had poop smeared on it, there were chunks of various bodily excretions in the sink, next to the sink, in the trash can, next to the trash can, just frickin' everywhere I looked there was crap, puke, or a lovely mixture. I didn't even make it 3 steps into the room before my gag reflex reminded me that it existed. My eyes were watering, my stomach was doing somersaults, and I was choking back my own barrage of throw-up when it hits me. Hey, screw this. Nope. Not a frickin' chance. I choked out through gasps of air. Not a frickin' chance in heck I'm cleaning all that up. Call hazmat. Half joking, not thinking my manager would actually expect me to clean that up. Boy, was I ever wrong. Terrence, if that bathroom isn't clean by the end of your shift, then don't bother coming back. She didn't get to finish the sentence. I'd already thrown my hat and shirt on the floor. Sorry, Jill, but you don't pay me nearly enough for that. I can find another crappy minimum wage job tomorrow. Good luck with that debacle in there. And just like the phantom turd spewers, I was gone. I saved up for a trip to England and France. I had 2 weeks of vacation that I'd planned for months. My boss called and wanted me to come home early to work someone's shift. When told she's on vacation in Europe, the boss was like, "Can't she just catch a flight?" For $11 an hour that would have been paid anyway on vacation pay. I no longer work at that company. I got fired for a bad attitude, and I used my time out to go back to school and get a job that I love, making more money with better management. I was asked to skip an immigration meeting that I needed to have to stay in the country for a 1-hour meeting with a client, even though I told them about it weeks in advance. I informed my boss that if I skipped the meeting, I would be ineligible to work in the country in 2 weeks. They still bothered me to try and reschedule my federal government meeting. It was just ridiculous. I was once asked to take a pay cut so I could work more hours. Yes, they wanted to tack on an extra 16 hours, Saturday and Sunday, to the work week while reducing pay so that I'd have the same amount of money for more work. They were angry when I said no, then told me I had no choice. When I told them I quit, they tried to tell me I couldn't. They were insistent that I was going to work for them. A manager asked me to wrap my arm up in a bin bag and stick my hand into a loo to try and unblock it. I was a waiter/barman taking food out to customers. I highlighted this to him and he insisted that I do it. I promptly told him to F off and mentioned health and safety. So he ended up doing it. On a side note, he was fired 2 weeks later for making inappropriate comments to female staff members. So yeah, he was a D-bag anyway. One time, a customer asked me for all the money in the registers. Since he had a weapon, I didn't feel that it was that unreasonable at the time. Looking back, it was a bit of an odd request. Listen, I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but there is a non-zero chance that you might have been robbed. Of course, you should review the purchase history on your point-of-service machine just to be sure, but unless your restaurant was offering $500 cashback on 9mm inspections, there's every chance that that wasn't 100% above board. Bartender. On Good Friday at 9 p.m., a lady had the nerve to ask me to tell another customer to quit swearing because it was Good Friday. I told her as nicely as I could that we're all adults, and that I simply wouldn't feel okay with telling another paying customer to stop swearing. My boss saw the conversation and me walking away while she had a sour expression on her face, and asked me what that was about, so I told him. He actually had the nerve to tell me that I needed to go tell the guy to watch his mouth. Now keep in mind, my boss was a cool guy, so I could speak openly to him. Not the best bar manager, he was a banker before and got the job because he was the owner's friend and just got tired of banking. So I responded to him like I wish I could have responded to her, which was something along the lines of, if the sanctimonious witch is so frickin' worried about swearing on Good Friday, what the frick is she doing in a sports bar drinking? I literally will walk out of this job right now before I impose her will on another customer because of her beliefs. To which he said, "Oh, good point. Screw her." I was asked to teach an ESL class in the closet of the library. The librarian didn't clean out the closet, the custodian merely shoved a few desks into it. When there was another class in the library proper, I had to close the closet door. We could hardly breathe with all the dust and the lack of ventilation. I quit shortly thereafter and reported the school to the Office for Civil Rights for discriminating against non-English-speaking students. My own review. My boss was too lazy to do the department's reviews, so he told me to do all of them. I told him to F off. He said he'd take me to HR. I told him I'd bring the email where he asked me to review my co-workers, which was his job. I got a great review and he bought me lunch. We did this at Costco. We were asked to do our own review at home on our own time. The boss would read it, rewrite it to make things look good, and we were asked to sign the real version. Train a guy who was making more than I was to be my boss. Yeah, nah, screw that. Got asked to hide my chest milk after it was pumped. I had the audacity to carry it from the room I pumped in to the freezer as if it wasn't a bag full of shame milk. Don't bring it to work if you're not going to share. When working overtime or even a regular 8-hour day, our break is still 15 minutes, which is timed, and we're expected to use the bathroom during our timed breaks. Running back and forth to the bathroom isn't a frickin' break. Can you adjust my package, please? I'm a nurse, by the way. I used to work in a restaurant that was above a pro shop for golf. Across the street was a ski area. This is Bear Mountain, California. The guy that owned the restaurant where I worked also owned the seasonal snack bar and restaurant in the chalet at the bottom of the ski slope. He had a big chest freezer in the chalet where he kept a bunch of meat, and some idiot turned off all the electricity, including the stuff going to the freezer. This happened when the ski slope shut down for the season. My boss didn't discover it for almost 2 months. He told me, "I have an unpleasant job for you to do, but you have to do it. When he lifted the lid on the freezer, my shock of how bad it smelled literally made me chuck up right there on the floor. I could tell my boss was close to hurling as well, but he had already been exposed to the horror once already, so he was prepared. He told me to put it all in garbage bags and tote it out to the dumpster. He told me that dealing with the smell and the slime was really nothing more than mind over matter. He looked me square in the eye and told me, "I don't mind, so it don't matter." I was 14 years old and living on my own. I needed that job, so I did it. Once a week, my boss makes me go to Carvel and get an ice cream cake and sit and eat it with her. She says she can't fit into her clothes. I guess she wants me to not fit into my clothes either. When I was about 16, I got hired to do cleanup on a paint factory that was over 100 years old. They had these massive paint thinner tanks on a hill behind the plant that were gravity-fed into the factory and they'd clogged. The boss wanted us to physically climb down into the tank, which was waist-deep full of Varsol, that paint thinner, and to remove said substance with 5-gallon buckets. This was a while ago back in Newfoundland, and safety gear didn't exist on the island yet. We all refused, and after that spent most of our time smoking green herb on the roof. We all got fired a few days later, although some of the other stuff we did there will probably show up as some strange form of cancer at some point in the future. Writing an HTML parser using regular expression. I'm so sorry. I don't know what this means, but given how many more code-savvy people were mortified in replying to your comment, allow me to extend my sincere, confused condolences on here as well. I had a customer ask me to fill their propane tank in a thunderstorm, with no power. They were absolutely perplexed when I politely told them that I could not. They got mad and told my manager, who looked at them like they had 3 heads and a death wish. They met one of those criteria, and after much arguing, promptly told them to leave. He was awesome. I was making $12 an hour as an office temp at a government office. My boss filled a box full of pepper spray, flares, and flashbangs. Then she labeled it toiletries and told me to take it out to air cargo and send it on a passenger flight to one of our sites. I didn't want to go to jail for causing a mid-air accident, so I took the stuff for myself and distributed it to other projects within the same government department. A few weeks went by as they tried to determine what had happened to their stuff. Finally, my boss came into my office and said, "This is theft over $1,000. We'll have to get the RCMP, or the federal cops, involved." I told her, "You can't do that without implicating yourself in a worse crime. You should just forget about the whole matter." A week later, they cancelled my contract with a temp agency and hired me directly at $24 an hour plus benefits. I've been working as a substitute teacher for the last few weeks. At this very moment, I'm sitting at a desk in an empty hallway staring at a door. I will sit at this desk for the next 3 hours. To answer your question, I find it semi-ridiculous that I'll be compensated for this time. What was the most cringe way that someone ever tried to ask you out? In the 7th grade, I was a very awkward child. Kind of chubby, no fashion sense, and my face generally resembled that of a gorilla. I'd already accepted the fact that boys weren't going to like me. One day I was hanging out with a guy friend, Richard. Richard was a sweet kid and pretty cute, and I'd met him through another friend. It was just Richard and me chilling in a hallway when he suddenly asked me to the school dance that was happening on a Friday. I couldn't believe it. A cute guy had just asked me to a dance? Are you sure this was real life? Say yes, you idiot. Say yes. So, of course, I did what any reasonable 13-year-old girl would do. I screamed and ran away. Richard didn't want to hang out with me again after that, and I still feel bad about it to this day, a decade later. Went to a guy's house to do a project in high school. It involved the internet, and while he sat next to me, I tried to navigate to Google. Unfortunately, the address bar auto-filled and took me to his last Google search. Page 2 of results for my name. Every link had been clicked. We both just sat in silence. I think he should have said, "Well, I had to make sure you weren't a murderer before letting you into my house." I mean, he would have still been creepy, but you'd be the suspected murderer. I managed a cafe that was located about an hour or something's drive from my house. There was this guy who had it really bad for me. He came in a couple of times a day and refused to be served by any of my staff. Just me. Anyway, as if that wasn't bad enough, one day during the winter it got very icy, so I decided to not drive home, but stay in a B&B instead. Safety and crap, you know? Don't ask me how, but he found out and stayed in the same B&B. I was woken up by him banging on my door. When I opened, he stands there fuming about how I don't trust him, or why else would I lock the door to my room during the night. Now, who doesn't lock the door in a B&B? Also, well, guess what? He obviously tried the door. What the frick, man? Also, by the time I made it to work the next morning, a 2-minute walk from the B&B, he had already managed to tell a good portion of the townies that he and I had spent the night together. This guy actually scared the crap out of me. I regularly passed up other people working on the same street to not have to walk to the parking lot alone. I'm not working there anymore, and since I'm living far away, I saw him driving through my town last summer once, but since he doesn't have my address and my house is kind of off the beaten track, I'm not too worried. Also, my boyfriend is living with me now, so all is well. Yes, this is indeed cringe, if it's possible for something to be gross, frightening, and still be something as trivial as cringe. What kind of sick gratification that man got after claiming you'd notched his bedpost is beyond me. Surely he just hated himself internally. During camp, I once heard mention of a girl who was into me. I wasn't that much of a fan of her, so I didn't follow it up. The day after, I came past this girl and noticed part of my name written on her hand. I asked what the deal was, she lifted her sleeve and my name was written all over her body. I was so freaked out that I didn't know how to react, I just ran away. I bump into her here and there nowadays, it's still extremely awkward. In high school, this guy who liked me used to leave love notes in my locker. They'd always had really disturbing pictures or poems in them. Not knowing that it was a friend, I used to bring them to the morning table to be like, who the frick is leaving these in my locker? I feel bad about it now, because it seems everyone knew it was him apart from me. A girl walked up to me once and said, "You're my boyfriend now. Accept it or I'm breaking up with you." I mean, she sounds hilarious, depending on the tone and the number of dangerous objects she was holding. Look at me. Look at me. I am your girlfriend now. When I was in the 4th grade, I remember having the biggest crush on a girl in my PE class. Having thought things through, I decided that I needed her to know of my undying love for her, so I wrote her a note to deliver to her in PE. So finally, when we're all sitting in our grid formation on the gym floor, I decide the time has in fact come. I get up and start walking to the fountain. She's in between, and I'd planned on just dropping her the note en route. However, in the 5 seconds between me getting up and when I'm to drop the note off, I decide that this is too easy. I've got to give her a challenge. I then proceed to the water fountain with a new plan. As soon as I get there, I plunge the note into the water, creating a wet, squishy mess that resembles a white piece of crap. My logic at this point in my life was that the wet paper would create a situation in which she'd have to spend some time decoding the note. By making the note harder to read, she'd undoubtedly be impressed. On the way back to the seat, I dropped the white-looking turd thing off with her. As you can probably guess, she didn't know what in God's name it was. She just stared at it on the gym floor for a second with her mouth open. Before she could say anything, I hightailed it back to my seat, giggling the whole way. She not once ever spoke to me again. I think it's safe to assume that she did not decode the message. In short, I once tried to tell a crush that I loved her by writing a note, soaking it in water, scrunching it up like a turd, and dropping it on the floor in front of her. I once sent a girl an email in reply to a mass email from a university course we were taking together, professing my interest in her. I clicked reply and not reply all, so I thought it was safe. I didn't know how listservs work. Yeah, I regretted that one. My work started using a program that began hiring ex-cons. One of the guys hired through this program started showing an interest in me. I wasn't attracted to him at all and made it clear to him repeatedly. Long story short, he got fired 3 months later but kept coming around the store to, quote, visit his friends. I went out to my car to read during lunch like I normally do, and there was this creepy metal and mesh flower on my windshield. I look around the parking lot to see who could have left it, and I see nobody. I threw it into a grassy area and forgot about it. I read through my lunch hour and went inside, and no sooner than I clock in, I hear a page that I have a phone call for me. It's him. All he says is, "You look so pretty when you're reading." I hung up immediately and told the manager. He kept doing more things that escalated the creepiness. I ended up getting an emergency restraining order against him when I found out he'd added me as an emergency contact with his parole officer. I didn't even know the guy. A close friend tells me she's had very strong feelings for me for the past 3 years. She tells me this a couple of days before we graduate college. I didn't feel the same way about her. According to a mutual friend, her original plan was to romantically profess her love on the day of our graduation in front of all of our family and friends. You know, I have one that makes it seem like some guys never really grow out of that awkward high school crush phase. A couple of years ago, I worked the counter at a Chinese restaurant. They were a fairly busy place right beside my house, and I'd work for a few hours almost every day after school to get them through the rush. As a result, I had a lot of regulars who I recognized, and I behaved in a very friendly, familiar way with many customers. One guy would come in around 9 p.m. once every couple of weeks and was just very quiet. I'd give him his food and he'd stammer out a thank you and make terrified, jutting all over the place eye contact during our interaction. I mean, this was no problem. He seemed like a normal middle-aged man. One night, he picked up his takeout bag and somehow managed to get his finger snagged under a staple and cut himself. He started bleeding pretty profusely, and I grabbed some napkins, trying to help him, but he kept playing it off and just booked it out there. The next day, I got to work, and a bunch of my customers were telling me they heard about me on the radio. Apparently, this guy was a very popular morning radio DJ, and he had been talking about a girl he gets takeouts from and is completely in love with for months. He'd mock all of his awkward interactions with me and profess his love and how beautiful he thought I was, and I guess that in telling the most recent staple story, he revealed that I worked at a Chinese takeout place, and a ton of my customers and co-workers put it together. Everyone was recounting all of these cringy, humiliating things the guy had done while picking up food from me that I'd barely noticed or remembered. It was so weird. I felt like a tabloid celebrity. He kept coming in, and I never told him that I knew he made a habit of mentioning me on the air, but I did try really hard to make sure our interactions went smoothly and to bolster his social confidence just a little bit. I really hope the rest of the locale wasn't just staring wide-eyed at the two of you for the remainder of these encounters, because that just seems awkward as all heck. It's also completely realistic that a man who was that jittery in social interactions could be smooth as all heck on the radio. I'm a very different man on the stage or on my microphone compared to regular human conversation. I actually seem like I have a personality in the former activities. Not sure if this person had a crush or was just crazy, but anyway. So I met this girl at a bar. Nice girl. Cute, blonde, typical college type. I exchanged numbers with her, thinking that we could hang out again. Fast forward to a few days later when we were just texting back and forth, setting up a date. She asked, "So how's tonight sound for you?" "Oh, I can't. I'm meeting my friend for drinks because she's leaving town." "Hey, wait, you didn't tell me you were seeing other girls? I thought we had something going on. I'm sorry, I can't do this. Please stop texting me." I just told her I'm meeting a good friend whom I've known for years and she refuses to listen. So I thought, great, dodged a real crazy bullet right there. And then she texts me saying she wants to meet again, and I said no because she was being a little crazy and making me uncomfortable. Here are some of the best creepy texts she sent me afterwards. "No, I won't stop texting you until you explain to me why you won't come out and see me." I'd already told her at this point that she was being overreactive and making me uncomfortable, and that I lost interest. "Do us a favor and stop being a butthole. Why can't you put the past behind you and give us a second chance? Forgiveness is a virtue." Then, "Just pretend that never happened and we can be happy together. I'll give you a day to get over it. We don't have to meet immediately. We can text and see how we feel. I'm in no rush." And finally, "You need to learn how Americans work. You're obviously just being rude like all other Asians." I was so glad that iOS 7 had a built-in block feature. I'm still keeping the texts in case something happens to me in the future. Freshman year of high school, this one girl had a thing for me. She'd talk to me in the halls a lot and stare. Well, one day, as I was getting picked up by my mum, she flung herself onto the hood of my car and just professed her love for me. In front of my mum. Mum hasn't let me live that one down yet. In fact, it's a topic of conversation when we have guests over. "I bet it's a thing of pride for your mum, having ladies literally fling themselves around her son." You mean literally flinging themselves in front of cars? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, it is my time to shine. So I had a problem in high school, and that problem was that I would attract really creepy boys. Like ones who'd publicly declare their love for me and follow me around boys. Not good. But the one that tops the cake was this guy Tony. I'd known him for a while, but we'd never really talked until one day when he started messaging me about his problems on Facebook. I was like, this is kind of weird, but maybe he's just lonely? We've become better friends, and one night we're talking and he tells me that he's really into me and he'd like to kiss me. At this point I had a boyfriend that I was crazy about, so I told him it was nice, but I had a boyfriend. Bam. 2 days later my boyfriend broke up with me. Tony calls me up to comfort me that night, being all nice and telling me how beautiful I am and how much he cares about me. The next day he walks me to and from every class, wants to hang out after school and texts me all day. Now, I'm not interested in dating him at all, and having just broken up with my boyfriend, I tell him that I appreciate everything he's done, but I'm not interested in dating him or anyone for a while. Yes, you are. You owe me. Excuse me? There is no way you would put up with all of my bullcrap if you weren't interested, and besides, I was there for you when your boyfriend broke up with you. Turns out, Tony had a history of being horrible to former girlfriends, and he was extremely manipulative. This was the beginning of threats of him not being alive anymore if I didn't date him, following me around school, and drunk texts and calls in the middle of the night. It finally ended when he told me to be his girlfriend or he'd move away and wreck his life. I told him good luck, and he did. Last I heard, he was in jail for extremely inappropriate behavior with a minor. I once wrote a love poem about the girl I liked. Apparently, the complexities of the human brain unraveled by your long blonde mane is not a line that attracts women. I don't know if I'm more embarrassed by the rejection or by the awful poetry. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you want to see the full poem. The first and worst of my short poetry career. This one is titled, So Love is Nothing. Love, excruciatingly painful. Why do you steal my heart? I try to ignore you, but you're always there. Gnawing away, driving my mind insane, filling my body with your delusional dreams, ignoring the obvious truth. I don't know why, it just is so. You cloud the brain with doubt. Love, lust, I do not know you. Why do you persist in this game of yours? What did I do to deserve this? Why must you be so cruel that you don't love me yourself? You took my love, but nothing in return, just the void. A black hole sucks you away from me. Fate. Why be so? The complexities of the human brain unraveled by your long blonde mane. Oh, one kiss, one kiss, one kiss, I cry, but nothing in return. Darkness closes on this dwindling light. One day it will shine bright. I was 10 or 11 years old and had just gotten a Game Boy and Pokemon Red for Christmas. A boy in my class noticed and was super excited. He watched me play and eventually got Pokemon Blue for himself so we could play together. We bonded a lot over Pokemon and played at every lunch break. Of course, I didn't get at the time that he had a crush on me as he was a very shy kid, and I was new to this thing of boys liking me. Eventually, we started going home to our places and playing after school. At this time, he started to warm up to me, so he decided it was a good idea to start tooting really loudly. I still remember us sitting in one sofa each in my living room and him letting them rip every other minute. He declared happily how great it was to be home from school because he could let him rip, and I just sat there wondering what the heck had just happened. In short, a kid that was crushing on me went home to my place and started a butt orchestra. I mean, Junior skipped a few stages of the relationship there. You generally don't start completely grossing out your former romantic partner until you've locked them down in place, and the legal hassle of leaving you is greater than their disgust for your bodily emissions. And even then, they can just toot right back at you, so play it smart, people. Met a girl in my chemistry class. We started talking and usually sat next to each other. One day I mentioned that I'm a little hungry and I'll probably get lunch after class. She says she's hungry too, and we decide to get lunch together. Normally I'd be excited that a girl even talked to me, but she was way out of my league, so I didn't think she'd even have a morsel of interest in me. After lunch, we go back to our residence hall. We lived in the same building. I go to get on the elevator up to the 6th floor, and she stops me by placing a hand on my forearm and says, "Wait, I think I left my sweater in your room." And I simply look at her and say, "You've never been in my room before." After this, I facepalmed so hard and I regret it every day. Now she doesn't even look at me. In short, you've never been in my room before, and never will be. Not me, but a girl who I'll call Lexi in my class is a classic 10 out of 10 and has to deal with this stuff on a regular basis. There's another guy that goes to my school who I'll call Shiloh, who has absolutely no concept as to how social situations work and in the past has fallen in love with any girl who even talks to him. Because of the continuous stream of guys that Lexi had to deal with, she has her phone set in a way that will only receive calls from approved numbers. So Shiloh stole her phone and approved his own number. He then proceeded to ask her out and tell her that he'd enjoy rubbing his sack over her butt. Classy as F. Oh boy. Greg. Greg was this weirdo guy at my school who was 2 years ahead of me. Let me paint you a picture. Short and skinny, with a lazy eye and a huge scar on his neck from a track procedure. Super duper gothed out. This is like 2004 to 2006. Black gloves with safety pins everywhere. He sometimes wore a Phantom of the Opera mask to school. Last time I saw him on any kind of social media, he was wearing a red silk cape in the profile picture. You get it. He was in my health class. He was weird, but he seemed harmless, and my health class was full of buttheads who'd pick on the kid for no reason. And little baby freshman me thought she needed to be super nice to him just to make up for everything. I didn't think much of it, just, tried not being a butthead. Well, come springtime, I walk into the journalism lab and I sit down at my computer to find, oh, what's this? A note under my mouse. All of my friends are curiously gathered around me, and I read my name, and then, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the stones to ask you in person, but… And thus begins the note where he asks me to prom with him. This is like maybe 10 days before prom, by the way. Apparently, he's been in love with me the whole semester and had even changed around his class schedule to not only be in another class with me, but also so he could pass by me in the hallways. I tell him, no, sorry, I'd already planned to have a sleepover at my friend's house that night. I was 14, okay? I didn't know any better. So as far as I was concerned, that solved it. I didn't hear from him much after that. The next year, no classes with him, barely any contact, until one fateful day, about 10 days before prom, I'm walking out of my journalism class and boom, there he is, right in my face. Hey, do you want to go to prom with me this year? This time it's easier. No thank you, sorry. But hey, it was his senior year and he'd be graduating and I'd never have to see him again, right? Great! Oh, he's joining the army? Well, that's nice. Basic starts a month after graduation? Well, good luck, pal. And then I was free. No Greg, not even a thought of him until my junior year. I walk into the cafeteria before school one morning and there he is, looking as gothy and weird as ever. He starts walking towards me and I make a dash to the girls' bathroom, pretending I didn't see him. My school didn't really allow visitors, so I was sure he'd be gone soon. And then that afternoon, I was sitting at lunch, eating with my little sister and a group of our friends. I'd considered eating in the bathroom Mean Girls style just in case, but no. And he walks up to me with tears in his eyes, asks to talk to me for a second. Sure. In front of everyone, he tells me he has something for me. He whips out a stack of 30-something letters he'd written me in basic training, tells me that he loves me and he's deploying to Afghanistan next week. Wants my address so he can actually send me the letters. The guy is openly weeping. I take the letters, write down my address real quick, and go spend the rest of my lunch in the bathroom as originally planned. I should not have opened those letters. Oh my god, they were graphic. They were not safe for work. They detailed what our children would look like, where we'd live, our careers, our retirement together, and they were all like that. Guess who didn't deploy to Afghanistan after all? Heck, guess who didn't even finish basic training? About a month after that incident, he messaged me on MySpace, apologizing for being a weirdo creep. I wrote back saying something like, "Don't worry about it." Then the next day, when I came home from youth group or wherever I'd been, my mum handed me the phone. "Someone named Greg has been calling for you. He's called here 25 times in the past 2 hours. You might want to call him back." So I did. I told him off, asked him not to contact me anymore. I was pretty angry. Last I heard from him was when I googled my own name and found a MySpace note he had written detailing his intense hatred for me and why I'm a stupid C-word who needs to die and how I need to die and so on. In short, sometimes there's a reason why people don't have any friends. I tried to be nice, ended up the object of a weirdo's obsession. In year 8, before the time of texting, a boy who liked me gave a girl on my bus a letter for me. It was a letter confessing his love for me, written entirely in 50-cent lyrics. The closing line being, "I love you like a fat kid love cake. You know my style, I'll say anything to make you smile." Oh god, this is making me relive all of the horrible cringe stories with people that I had crushes on. What the heck was wrong with me? I'm never going to get to sleep now. What's the big mystery of your childhood that you finally solved years later? I learned that the brown part of the bread doesn't contain the nutrients, it's just the more cooked outer layer. My brother lied to me to get me to eat crust when I was a kid. I have a memory from when I was 6 of an old man cracking jokes with the kids and spitting his dentures into his food. I thought it was hilarious and I knew this man was named Frank. Casually mentioned it to my grandmother. Turns out I was remembering my great-grandfather, and that day was my great-grandmother's funeral. My dad used to occasionally burst out with this one line of a song, "Said Barnacle Bill the Sailor." Only ever that line. When I was 6 or so, I asked him why, and he said it was an old drinking song that was absolutely filthy and I was too young to hear the rest of it. This continued once or twice a year until I was 18. I told him that I was an adult now and he could tell me the rest of the song. I distinctly remember him looking up from the newspaper, sighing and folding it, then going, "The truth is, I can never remember the rest of the song." And then he went right back to reading the newspaper. I mean, your dad wasn't wrong about it being filthy. Barnacle Bill is written in its entirety on Wikipedia. And let me tell you, it is too long and definitely not YouTube appropriate. Not the biggest mystery, but one day my friend was over in my house playing video games. My mum calls us over to her room to help flip the mattress over. So we did. We then went to another friend's house. My mum then calls that friend and says, "There were two $20 bills on top of the dresser. Did you take them?" I said no. I asked my friend and he said no as well. Then like 5 minutes later, my friend asks if we want to go to the toy store because he has $40 in two $20 bills. I say yes, and we go and he buys me a yo-yo or something. It took me years to finally realize that my friend stole from my family. The entire time I lived in my childhood home, my mum hid my Christmas presents in her secret hiding place. She made it sound mystical and mysterious. A few months ago, a while after I moved out, she finally told me what the secret hiding place actually was. The Christmas tree box in a cabinet in the garage. She'd replaced the Christmas tree with my presents when she put the tree up. Plain sight is always the best strategy. Something that a small part of your brain knows is filled with something else that you don't care about, and it continues to know that, even after the filling has been demonstrably removed in front of your eyes and decorated in the living room. Very cunning. Growing up, I always insisted that I liked the mashed potatoes at my grandma's house better than the ones my mum made. My grandma once told me it's because she uses a special recipe. I found out last year that my mum hand mashes her potatoes and my grandma just gets the Betty Crocker boxed crap. Her special recipe I was going to get when she dies is Betty frickin' Crocker. I remember being about 8 and in the car with my dad. I was in the front seat and we were driving somewhere and this song came on the radio. He cranked it and said something about it being the best guitar playing ever. He really jammed out, which was really uncharacteristic because he was usually so stoic. It was the only time I heard the song and he died before I could ever ask him what it was. When I asked around, nobody knew what the frick I was talking about or what song I was thinking of. So I had this melody in my head for years, but how do you look up a song that has no lyrics? So for years and years, this song stayed on the back burner of my brain. I was afraid to forget it. Somehow this story pops up when I'm like 26 or so, chatting with my husband, and we searched YouTube for best guitar songs. And after about 15 minutes, we find it. Cliffs of Dover was the song that I'd burned into my brain on repeat for 16 years. And now I jam out to it with my kids. When I was in elementary school, I always wondered what the teacher's staff room was like. It seemed so mysterious, and I remember trying to get a peek anytime I walked by and the door would open. Later I became a teacher and I can fully confirm that they're dull, often toxic spaces full of cranky teachers complaining about their students. When I was younger, like 4 or 5, my family had a pet turtle. One day the turtle went missing and my parents told me it had climbed the wall in our backyard and went to the creek behind our house. I, being a naive toddler child, did not question this logic. Fast forward to when I was 17 and driving with my mum in the car, we saw a tortoise crossing the street and I was suddenly thrown back to my memory of us having a pet turtle. I pulled over to save the tortoise and I was all like, "Oh my god, Mum, turtles can't climb walls! What happened to our turtle?" I came to find out it had burrowed a hole in our lawn and my dad hadn't noticed it until he had run it over with a lawnmower. Obviously, it was easier to pick up the pieces and tell your kid it climbed the wall than admit you murdered it with a lawnmower. In short, my parents lied to me about a pet going missing and I found out it was brutally murdered, by accident, by my father. I kind of have a weird reverse of the question, but I promise it's good. As a kid, my dad would call me from the other side of the house to bring him something to drink from the kitchen. He always drank from a straw, and about first grade I started getting annoyed at this, so I started poking a tiny hole in his straw as my own little vengeance. I didn't come clean about this until I was like 22 years old. The look on his face was priceless. It's like he instantly snapped back to then and knew exactly what I was talking about and just said, "Son of a witch, you did, didn't you?" He just thought we were buying cheap straws. Haha, I have a reverse one also. Mum used to make those Betty Crocker cakes and I loved eating the batter. I'd eat so much of it that there would be barely any cake left. She was completely perplexed. Finally, she writes a long, angry email to Betty Crocker about what a farce their cake mix is because it barely makes a cake big enough to eat. They apologized profusely and sent a bunch of free cake mix. I told her in my late 20s, and the look on her face. Oh. I actually solved a family mystery for my mum. I wasn't allowed to play console video games during the week all the way until I was 18, but some nights I'd really be craving it, so I would noiselessly creep through my house into the basement where I could play video games in peace. But once every 30 times or so, one of my parents would need something from the basement, and I'd quickly turn off the TV monitor, hide in the guest room, and pray that they didn't turn on a light or notice the Xbox was on. One night, I ducked into the guest room and hid behind the bed. To my horror, my mum followed me into the room and turned on the lights. I was panicking, so when she started digging through the closet with her back to me, I just made a run for it. I nearly brushed her shirt, and if she'd seen me, I'd probably have given her a heart attack. But I made it and kept going all the way to bed. About 5 years went by, and my mum said something like, "You're such a quiet walker." And I told her it was because of my basement trips, thinking I had nothing to lose. My mum's face went kind of solemn when I explained, and she said, "So there really was someone down there." And she explained that she remembered that exact night and the feeling that there was a ghost in the room. Over the next couple of days, she'd stare into space and just say, "I can't believe you were really there." She seemed to get over it, but she probably checks empty rooms a little closer now. I visited my dad when I was 6 or 7 years old at the place where he worked, or so I was told. I remember remarking at the time, and people laughed at me because I said it just looked like a prison. The people laughing were the guards, and I was indeed visiting my dad at Terminal Island Federal Correctional Institution, where he was a federal inmate. Once when I was about 7 or 8, my family was having a pool party, and my 20-something aunt was sitting by the pool with a glass of clear liquid. I was hot and thirsty, so I reached for her drink, and she said, "Don't drink that, it's pool water." I wondered why in the heck she'd have a glass of pool water, but I left it alone. Years later, as my family's alcohol consumption habits became a lot clearer to me, I realized she was probably drinking vodka. My mum used to call us in for dinner by yelling out the back door from the kitchen. I was in middle school before I realized the scream door was actually called a screen door. When I was a kid, my dad bought me one of those big candy cane things filled with jelly beans. I was so excited to eat them, but I was told I had to wait for the next day. I asked for them later, but apparently they disappeared into thin air. I couldn't find my candy cane anywhere. Lots of weird stuff used to happen around our house, like borderline paranormal stuff, and my dad said it was just that. No, it wasn't. That motherfricker ate my frickin' jelly beans. I think the part you skipped over here leaves some questions. You mentioned that paranormal stuff happened in your place all the time, and I wonder just how much was down to your dear old dad, because the jelly beans should have triggered a full-blown interrogation. You know, I'm not sure if this is considered a mystery or not. My mother, who passed in 2009, used to make meatloaf every single year on Groundhog's Day. Every single year. Every single year she'd tell us it was groundhog, and I always thought it just tasted like ground beef. But I was a kid. I'm 33 now. Last year I said something to my brother about it and asked if he knew where my mum got the ground hog. I wanted to do that for my son. My brother had no idea what I was talking about. I told him about it and he started laughing. My wife started laughing, and my own son, who didn't know why, started laughing as well. Mum got me real good, you guys. Mystery solved. It was just regular meatloaf. We grew up poor, and at the age of 10, my friends were all having these crazy birthday parties with petting zoos, bouncing houses, clowns, stuff like that. So my mother, who's a very resourceful woman indeed, decided I would have a sleepover for my 11th birthday. It was great, and we were going to make ice cream cones. So we got all the stuff out with my mum, and my mum opened the box of cones up, and they were all smashed up. She announced that we weren't having regular ice cream, we were having Magic Castle sundaes, because the broken ice cream cones resembled the sections of a castle. We all thought this was great, and we had them. When my friends went home, they asked their parents to make Magic Castle sundaes as well. 2 days ago, I found out that my mother was just getting the past sell-by foods from behind the grocery store. They weren't expired, just past the sell-by date. She had no idea that the cones were broken up until she opened them with us. She thought of the Magic Castle idea quickly, and we all loved it. Just goes to show how stupid kids are. Goes to show how quick-witted she was, and able to make it seem special enough that the other kids wanted it too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I live and grew up in the Deep South. As a child, from earliest memories until about 8, we'd take a winter trip up to Stowe, Vermont to see the grandparents. I'd have scary nights hearing ghosts wailing outside the windows. It was terrifying. My grandparents moved south and we stopped going. When I was in my 30s, I took another trip up to Vermont. First night stay, I heard the ghosts. Turns out the winter winds up north are way different than the winds of southern nights. Suddenly, my general fear of the dark disappeared as I realized fully what the source of the sound was. When I was really young, me and my siblings would play in my grandparents' yard. My grandfather would tell us to stay away from the skunk hole at the edge of the yard. We lived in South Texas, so this wasn't something out of the ordinary, and we just avoided it like any other animal home. Years later, it dawned on me, it was actually the septic tank access. The reason that my aunt punched her husband at the pool during a huge family vacation. It was because she found out that the long-distance charges to the hotel room they shared had a ton of calls to a woman he was known to think was really swell. I have these massive gaps in my memories as a child, like weirdly inexplicable ones that always felt weird. Not just basic forgetting stuff. I've had a few instances of this happening as an adult as well. Well, it turns out I have a dissociative disorder that can cause amnesia. As a kid, I played Medal of Honor Allied Assault with my brother. We got to the 5th level, which took place in a rainy French city similar to Saving Private Ryan. However, we always got stuck on the first objective, which was to locate the bazooka team. There were no clues as to where this team was in a giant rubble-filled city with poor visibility. To make things worse, hidden enemy snipers would constantly fire at you, making the search much more difficult than it already was. My brother and I practically scoured every nook and cranny, but we never found that team. If the bazooka team was trying to stay hidden, they were doing a very good job. In the months that followed, we reinstalled and replayed the game several times, but we'd always get stuck on that level. Fast forward several years and I got the digital version of Allied Assault for nostalgia's sake. I dreaded playing the 5th level, but to my surprise, I easily cleared the first objective by happening across the corpses of the bazooka team in one of the buildings. Turns out the CD we originally played on was bugged, and the bodies never even rendered into the game. All we did was waste several hours looking for a group of people that never made it to the battle in the first place. Giddy at the prospect of finally completing the game, I happily continued the level only to quit when I kept getting sniped by those damn hidden snipers. When I was 10, my godfather gave me $20 as a Christmas gift. At the end of the dinner, the money had disappeared. For years, my parents blamed me for being irresponsible with my money. Years later, we figured out that after she was caught stealing stuff from my aunt's house, that my cousin's fiancé at the time was a kleptomaniac. Turns out she was the one that stole the money. One evening, when camping, my brother caught a fish that we decided to keep alive in the cooler for some reason. Well, the next morning we ran out to see the fish and it had grown like 5 inches. We were so excited and didn't know how the fish grew that much overnight. Last year we bought it up and my dad said that he'd got up that morning and seen the fish being taken by a raccoon and that he'd spent the next hour or so frantically fishing for another one. He said he caught the new fish, the first one that he was able to catch, just a few minutes before we got up. I'd never questioned that the fish had grown that much as I grew up myself, but after hearing what really happened, I did feel like we probably should have wondered about that more at the time. I have a similar story. When we were young, we got a pair of kittens, a black one, mine, and a grey one, my brother's. They got some vaccines, and some days later we woke up and the grey kitten had grown. Wow, cool. Why didn't my black kitten grow too? Strange, but whatever. Stopped questioning it. Turns out the grey kitten had randomly passed away one night. So my mom sent my dad out to get a new grey kitten so the kids wouldn't be sad. All he could find was a slightly older and bigger grey kitten, so they told us one of his shots had helped the cat grow. I believed that until late high school when my mom came clean. You probably told the story of how shots made one of your kittens grow to a teacher, who was then like, "Oh, honey." Yeah, given how kids like to blabber about the stranger phenomenon in their lives, there is a very good chance that this happened, and some poor teacher did indeed have to keep a straight face despite the knowledge that a kitty had recently died. Sad times. My father used to take us on camping and on hike and bike rides. He taught us about safety in the woods and on the water and how to navigate using maps. So it wasn't all that strange when he said one day, when I was maybe 10, we were doing a game where we'd be blindfolded and taken on a drive. The object of the game was to call out what direction we were turning by feel, and then ultimately, after driving about 30 minutes, give a guess roughly where we were and which direction home was in. He was impressed with how well we did, and we took off the blindfolds and went for a hike. I never really thought much about it. Years later, I realized why we played that game. My dad was in criminal psychology, especially for unspeakable act offenders. He was kidnap-proofing us, but in a light-hearted way so there was no fear or trauma. It's awesome that your dad instilled a sense of direction in you. That said, if I saw someone roll up in a car full of blindfolded kids that they then led into the woods, I'd be pretty concerned that I was witnessing a real-life, "You think you're scared? I'm the one who has to walk out of here alone," kind of moment. When I was 4, I vividly remember getting into my mum's car and her telling me that our cat had died. She told me how she rushed him to the vet and he was shedding fur, something was seriously wrong. Despite her best efforts, he died. I never knew why he died and why it happened so suddenly, but I accepted that it happened. Fast forward about 15 years, I'm home from college for Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I'm out drinking to the store with my dad and uncle. They're talking about the cat my parents got for Christmas one year, the cat mentioned above. My dad says, "Yeah, that thing got too aggressive, so I took it to a farm and gave it away." Normally when the family pet dies, the parents lie to the kid and say it went to a farm upstate somewhere to ease the burden. Not my parents. They told me the horrifying truth even though it wasn't, true. I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation with my dad when somebody told Riker to wash his back. When I asked my father why someone would say that to another person, he said, "So that you can smell someone coming up behind you." It wasn't until years later that I understood how easy it is to hear watch as wash and how committed my dad was to willfully deceiving his children for personal satisfaction. As a PS here, my brother and I were convinced that he spoke Spanish until we were teenagers. He did not. He simply rattled off a string of Taco Bell items as fast as he could. I learned that John Travolta was actually John Travolta, which really made a lot more sense. When I was like 8 or so, I answered our house phone and it was a man who asked to speak to my mum. Didn't ask for her by name and said, "Could I speak to your mom, please?" I asked who it was and he said, "It's Santa Claus." I was so excited and ran to my mum and I was telling all of my friends for days that Santa Claus had called my house. This led me to believe in Santa for a few years longer than most kids normally do. I was heartbroken when I found out that Santa wasn't real. Years and years later, I remembered to ask my mum who had called that day and said they were Santa Claus. It was our reverend, and my mum was a deacon. He had known me for years, so recognized my voice when I answered, and knew what age I was. It had never occurred to me. Not mine, but my husband's story. I hope he doesn't see this because then my cover is blown. He said in middle school there was a time that he'd get pulled out of class to shoot free throws in the gym. Only him. He didn't think this was strange, but didn't understand why he was the only one that got to do that. Turns out his parents told his teachers that he couldn't participate in the life skills class. My dad used to say he could stop the rain for a moment by snapping his fingers. He'd do it in the car when it was pouring. I was so mesmerized, I told all my friends about it well into late elementary school. I've since realized that he'd snap as we drove underneath an overpass. My dad is an ex-Catholic, and every night when he'd tuck me in until I left the house, he'd say, "We love you, God bless you, good night." And I was always wondering why since he stopped going to church so long ago. Fast forward to me being 28 years old and watching an old Bruce Springsteen concert together. One of his favorite artists, Bruce says, "We love you, God bless you, good night," at the end of his set. I turned my head towards my dad and asked if this was why he said that for years to me at night. He laughed and said, "Yeah, I have no original material." Who ate all the cherries in the cherry cake? I was blamed for this for years after someone picked out all of the cherries and ate them during a family Christmas party. 8 years later, my little sister confessed to me that it had been her. The mystery of why my mum never ordered anything for herself and was never hungry when she took my sister and I to eat out. 25 years later, she told us she was really hungry and wanted to eat too, but she only had enough money to feed the two of us. She didn't want us to feel guilty. I love my mum so much. When I was a kid in the 70s, my parents worked in Canada's Arctic, but were from Nova Scotia. I had a pet mouse, Pixie. Pixie died the night before our family flew home to Nova Scotia for summer vacation. It was many, many years later before I realized that probably wasn't a sad coincidence. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.